But this is the point. If you talk about the reality of racism, white supremacy, you have an excellent reputation, but no, you can't work because the white staff will be uncomfortable. And I dare say that that applies to all of the mental health clinics in the United States of America, because if it were not true, then you would have many more mental health workers, psychiatrists, psychologists, talking about the subject of racism, white supremacy. But just like in this case of Elliot Rodgers, you see, the racism is suppressed on the part of the media. No, we're not going to discuss that. And I want to suggest to your audience, everybody should get the book. You know, Albert Einstein, the genius physicist, wrote on race and racism. There's a book, it's a little bit old, but it's called Einstein on Race and Racism. And let me quote something that he said. This is a quotation from Albert Einstein. Genius. The separation of the races is not a disease of colored people. It is a disease of white people. I do not intend to be quiet about it, end quote, Albert Einstein. But the book is by Fred Jerome and Rodger Taylor. So it might be a good idea if people in your audience decide to try to get a copy of this book and read what the genius Albert Einstein had to say about race and racism.
Got my copy earlier this week. Thank you kindly.
Okay.
I would recommend folks do the same.
Got it, but did not read it. Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the system of white supremacy. Today's date, Thursday, June 18, 2020. So I have been told. This is our debut study session on Fred Jerome and Rodger Taylor's Einstein on Race and Racism. Now, you just heard Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. She mentioned that book way back in 2014. She was a guest on the program, and she talked about that book, Einstein on Race. She thoroughly encouraged listeners, as you heard, to check that book out. And as I got it that week, in fact, the reason that I said I got it earlier that week, I had spoken with Dr. Welsing before we did that program, and she talked about that book. And so that was how I had said, oh, okay, I'll check it out. Boom, got my copy, hadn't read it yet, and then she brought it up on the program. I'm glad she did, because our narrator, Mel, she has read numerous times for us. She read Asada's autobiography. She also read Neil Postman's Stupid Talk, Crazy Talk. Always a pleasure to have her delightful voice grace our airwaves. But she heard that broadcast from 2014 and said, oh, wow. I remember Dr. Welsing talking about this. This is the program where she talked about black males should have that conference and talk about how they're afraid of white people. And she does. I was struggling to even find the audio segment where she mentions this book. And I think Mel said she mentioned this book twice on the cows specifically. She mentioned this book, which she may have. I know she at least mentioned it once, and I think she may have indeed mentioned it again. So I'm so glad we're taking time to read this text. This should fall in the genre. Dr. Welsing regularly encouraged us to study Nazi Germany. And the parallels between what happened there and our condition under the system of white supremacy in the United States specifically. So this should fall in that genre. Also should be important because I think a lot of Einstein's commentary on racism is deliberately omitted from the record. I think that's a major point that'll be made in this book. I know in the audio segment, or the video, where the authors, Fred Jerome, Rodger Taylor, discuss this book, that seems to be one of the guiding principles, if not the main principle, in why they wrote this book in the first place, that, hey, Albert Einstein said a lot of really important things about white supremacy, racism. You heard Dr. Welsing read one of the quotes, and he talked to W.E.B. DuBois and Paul Robeson and all these really towering figures. When we start talking about racism in the 20th century, how is it that, all of this is omitted when we start talking about Albert Einstein? This seemed like it was something that was important to him, and he talked a lot about racism. Why is this left out when we talk about his life and times? People do biographies and studies on him. Why did they omit his commentary on racism? We will see, and we'll see what he had to say about racism, white supremacy. But keep that in mind. Dr. Welsing highly recommended that we read this book. What is it that she hoped we would learn? Context of White Supremacy, Fred Jerome, Rodger Taylor, Einstein on Race and Racism, audio segment 1.
Einstein on Race and Racism by Fred Jerome and Rodger Taylor. Preface. More than 100 biographies and monographs about Albert Einstein have been published, yet not one of them mentions the name Paul Robeson, let alone Einstein's friendship with him, or the name W.E.B. DuBois, let alone Einstein's support for him. Nor does one find in any of these works any reference to the Civil Rights Congress, whose campaigns Einstein actively supported. Finally, nowhere in all the ocean of published Einsteiniana, anthologies, bibliographies, biographies, summaries, articles, videotapes, calendars, posters, and postcards, will one even find an islet of information about Einstein's visits and ties to the people in Princeton's African-American community around the street called Witherspoon. One explanation for this historical amnesia is that Einstein's biographers and others who shape our official memories felt that some of his controversial friends, such as Robeson, and activities, such as co-sharing the anti-lynching campaign, might somehow tarnish Einstein as an American icon. That icon, sanctified by Time magazine when it dubbed Einstein the person of the century, is a myth, albeit a marvelous myth. In fact, as myths go, Einstein's is hard to beat. The world's most brilliant scientist is also a kindly, lovably bumbling grandfather figure, Professor Genius combined with Dr. Feelgood. Opinion molders looking down from their ivory towers may have concluded that such an appealing icon will help the great unwashed public feel good about science, about history, about America. Why spoil such a beautiful image with stories about racism, or, for that matter, with any of Einstein's political activism? Politics, they argue, is ugly, making teeth grind and fists clench. So why splash politics over Einstein's icon? Why drag a somber rain cloud across a bright blue sky? Einstein might reply, with a wink, that without rain clouds, life would be very, very short. Or he might simply say that a bright blue sky is a fairy tale in today's war-weary world. Yet, despite Einstein's clear intention to make his politics public, especially his anti-lynching and other anti-racist activities, the history molders have seemed embarrassed to do so, or nervous. Quote, "I had to think about my board," unquote, a museum curator, who doesn't want his name used even today, stated, while explaining his omission of some of the scientist's political statements from the major exhibition celebrating Einstein's 100th birthday in 1979. When it came to how to handle Einstein's ashes or his house on Mercer Street, everyone involved meticulously adhered to his wishes. But when it involved his ideas, and especially his concerns about what he called America's worst disease, the fact that Einstein wanted his views made as public as possible seems to have slipped past his historians. Readers may judge for themselves how much of this oversight is due to forgetting, and how much may be due to other motives, including, perhaps, disagreement with Einstein's point of view. It is not so much the motive for the omission, but the consequence that concerns us. Americans and the millions of Einstein fans around the world are left unaware that Einstein was an outspoken, passionate, committed anti-racist. Quote, "It is certain, indeed painfully obvious, that racism has permeated U.S. history both as an idea and practice," as the historian Herbert Aptheker states. Nevertheless, he adds, "it always has faced significant challenge." Racism in America depends, for its survival, in large part on the smothering of anti-racist voices, especially when those voices come from popular and widely respected individuals, like Albert Einstein. This book, then, aspires to be part of a grand unsmothering. Acknowledgements. Our thanks to Meg Rich for her invaluable guidance at the Special Collections in Princeton University's Firestone Library, as well as Anna Lee Pauls and Charles Green. To Dan Bauer, whose memory and files provided information on the history of MacArthur Theater programs, and Maureen M. Smith, who led us through the files of the Princeton Historical Society with verve and understanding. Our gratitude also to Daniel J. Linke, archivist and curator of public policy papers at Seeley G. Mudd Manuscript Library, Princeton University, his assistant, Tad Benikoff, and the entire superb staff at the Mudd Library. To Joey Cortruvo and Donald Marsden of Princeton University's Triangle Club, to Susan Pivar and the other good folks at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, for their generous assistance and hospitality, and to Yvonne Foster Sutherland for sharing her recollections and photos of Einstein's visit to Lincoln. To Terry Nelson at the Princeton Public Library, and Chris Moore at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, New York Public Library, for their knowledge and insight. Super helpful, too, were the Schomburg Center's entire librarian staff, Barbara Wolf, Chaya Becker, and Ronnie Gross at the Einstein Archives at Hebrew University in Jerusalem. Thanks also to Peter Filardo, archivist, and Dr. Gail Malmgreen, associate head for archival collections at NYU's Tamiment Library. And to Julia Newman, executive director of the Abraham Lincoln Brigade Archives, ALBA. To all the folks in the Witherspoon community, with extra special thanks to Alice and Shirley Satterfield for making their home available and inviting others to 2 wonderful lunch gatherings. And to Hank Pinnell for the extra outreach and contacting folks, taking photos and just being there, always with a can-do reassurance. To Mr. Albert Hines for sharing his unfaded 102-year-old memory with us. To Fanny and Jim Floyd for spending extra time and effort teaching us about the Witherspoon community and its history. To Mary Trotman for taking time from her overburdened work schedule, helping us to meet her mother Lily and Lily's granddaughter Lena. To Jack Washington for sharing his valuable time and historical knowledge. To Emily Belcher and to Nell Painter and Valerie Smith in Princeton University's program in African American Studies. To our friends and families who helped beyond help in reading, criticizing, encouraging, and most of all, tolerating our efforts. To Debbie, Jocelyn, Romari, Rebecca, Mark, and Daniel, with double-duty gratitude to Jocelyn for lending her insightful and persistent research, and to Rebecca for her skillful translation assistance. To Cheryl Gross, Michelle Boyd, James Boyd, Ernie Herman, and Bob Apter. To Nils and Gunilla Smith-Solbakken for providing a clean, well-lighted place, and to Florence Taylor for seeing Einstein walk through Princeton. Special thanks to John Stachel and Dorothy Zellner for meticulously and caringly correcting errors in our early drafts, and especially to Kitsy Watterson, not only for so unselfishly sharing her research and introducing us to so many friends, but also for her encouragement from the start. You simply must do this project. To our ever-young agent Frances Golden for her constant support, to Audra Wolfe, our diligent editor at Rutgers University Press, and last but furthest from least, to Michael Dineni, whose editorial assistance was magical. Part 1. Einstein and Robeson on Witherspoon Street. Your ancestors dragged these black people from their homes by force, and in the white man's quest for wealth and an easy life, they have been ruthlessly suppressed and exploited, degraded into slavery. The modern prejudice against Negroes is the result of the desire to maintain this unworthy condition. I believe that whoever tries to think things through will honestly soon recognize how unworthy and even fatal is the traditional bias against Negroes. Albert Einstein. Chapter 1. Escape from Berlin. On January 30th, 1933, the day Hitler and the Nazis took over the German government, the most famous scientist in the world may also have been the luckiest. Albert Einstein and his wife Elsa were away from their Berlin home on a visit to Pasadena, California, his third winter there as a guest faculty member at the California Institute of Technology. The Einsteins had planned to return home in the spring, but that was before January 30th. Within a few months, the Nazi regime made it clear that Einstein was still alive primarily because he was not in Germany. Einstein, more than any other scientist, arguably more than any other human being, by his very existence, a genius who was also a Jew, a Democrat, and later a socialist, gave the lie to Hitler's Nazi theories. Even before the Nazis started calling themselves Nazis, before Hitler's Nationalist Socialist Party emerged in the mid-1920s, right-wing German nationalists had targeted Einstein for attack. Some of these nationalists took to waiting for Einstein outside his apartment in Taberlandstrasse, or his office in the Prussian Academy of Science, and shouting denunciations of Jewish scientist as soon as the familiar figure appeared. Others filled his mailbox with obscene and threatening letters. On one occasion, a gang of right-wing students disrupted Einstein's lecture at Berlin University, and one of them shouted, "I'm going to cut the throat of that dirty Jew." An anti-Semitic demagogue named Rudolf Liebes was arrested in 1931 and fined the trivial sum of $16 for offering a reward to anyone who would assassinate the hated scientist. And while he was invited to speak and hailed by audiences around the world, one trip took the Einsteins to China, Japan, Palestine, and Spain, where they were cheered by hundreds of thousands. In Germany, a group calling itself the Committee of German Scientists for the Preservation of Pure Scholarship launched an attack on Einstein, labeling the theory of relativity a Jewish perversion. Even in winning the Nobel Prize in Physics for 1921, Einstein faced anti-Semitism. Note: Einstein had been nominated for the Nobel Prize in 10 of the previous 12 years, 1909 to 1920. Yet it wasn't until he had been hailed as a world-renowned celebrity that the Nobel Committee agreed to award him their prize. Years later, Irving Wallace, author of The Prize, interviewed Sven Hedin, one of the Nobel judges, who acknowledged that anti-Semitism had influenced the judges to vote repeatedly against an award for Einstein. Wallace, the writing of one novel. Hedin later publicly supported the Nazis and was a friend of Göring, Himmler, and Hitler. For several years in the mid-1920s, public anti-Semitism subsided, and the ultra-nationalists lowered their profile as the German economy steadied with the substantial economic aid from the United States and England. But toward the end of the decade, the economy faltered, and the far right flexed its political and paramilitary muscles. Hitler's Aryan supremacy racism infected millions of Germans seeking scapegoats for their economic difficulties and loss of international influence. And when the worldwide economic depression of 1929 brought rampant unemployment and inflation to Germany, it also brought the Nazis a large, disgruntled base of political recruits. The Nazi Party, led by Hitler, who had first made headlines in 1923 with its beer hall putsch, a failed attempt at taking over the government in the German state of Bavaria. Following the putsch, the party grew slowly, and by 1929 it had only 12 representatives in the Reichstag, the German Congress. The impact of the economic depression and the success of Nazi propaganda brought a surge of Nazi votes in the 1930 elections, increasing their Reichstag seats to 107. Nazi street gangs launched increasingly violent attacks against Hitler's enemies, especially the leftists and Jews, and as one historian put it, to ready the ground for the Nazi rise to ultimate power, the party raised the level of violence witnessed by ordinary Germans with each passing month. An incident on June 30th, 1932, was typical of the strategy. That afternoon, several hundred members of the Nazi SA and SS private armies invaded the working-class district of Berlin-Wedding, blocked the ends of a stretched road, chanting anti-Semitic slogans and attacking anyone luckless enough to be out and about. The Nazis beat up some 30 locals, including several old people and one pregnant woman, who was hospitalized in dire condition. There was no question about the identity of the Nazis' number one target. Their hostility, in the words of Einstein's biographer, Philipp Frank, was concentrated to an astonishing and frightening degree against Einstein. In 1929, a Leipzig publishing house issued a book titled 100 Authors Against Einstein. The book itself had little impact, but it was a warning. Attacks against prominent Jews may have faded during the stabilized mid-1920s, but now the threat was back. A friend who visited Einstein in Germany in 1930 described the growing signs of anti-Semitism. Many Jewish shops had been sacked, and reported that the scientist, for all his serenity, was anxious. The threats against Einstein increased as Hitler came closer to power. A local baker in Kaput, the village near Potsdam where Einstein had built a summer house, began to complain loudly to his customers about the scientist's Jewish house. In late spring 1932, the scientist stopped walking alone, and Elsa's friend Antonina Valentin warned her that to leave Einstein in Germany was to perpetrate a murder. Just before he and Elsa left Germany for the last time in December 1932, he received a friendly warning from a top German general that his life is not safe here anymore. Officially, the Einsteins were departing for one more semester abroad and planned to return to Berlin in the spring. Einstein told the New York Times, quote, "I am not abandoning Germany. My permanent home will still be in Berlin," unquote. But he may have had a suspicion that they would not return. When the steamer Oakland left Bremerhaven on December 10, 1932, it carried the Einsteins and 30 pieces of luggage. It was, as Einstein's friend and biographer Abraham Peiss put it, a little excessive for a 3-month absence. In America, Einstein was quickly vilified by the German state. He was assailed as the chief of a secret anti-Nazi movement, sometimes described as communistic, sometimes described as Jewish International. On March 23rd, the Third Reich barred Jews and communists from teaching in universities and working as lawyers or in civil service jobs. Scientists, especially Jewish scientists, were a special target for the regime that preached Aryan supremacy. One Nazi pedagogical leader put it plainly, quote, "It is not science that must be restricted, but rather scientific investigators and teachers. Only men who have pledged their entire personality to the nation, to the racial conception of the world, will teach and carry on research at the German universities." Unquote. The Nazis repeatedly raided the Einsteins' Berlin apartment, seized all their belongings, and froze their bank account. In March, Nazi SA agents ransacked their summer house in Kaput, searching for a secret cache of weapons allegedly hidden there by communists and intended for an anti-Nazi uprising. When they found no weapons, all they found was a bread knife, the New York Times reported, they confiscated the house anyway, declaring it was obviously about to be sold to finance subversive activities. Einstein was suddenly a refugee. Even if he might miraculously have survived a return to Germany, he told the press, quote, "As long as I have any choice in the matter, I shall live only in a country where civil liberty, tolerance, and equality of all citizens before the law prevail. These conditions do not exist in Germany at present time." Unquote. But the Einsteins did not return to Europe in the spring and summer of 1933, spending several months in the Belgian coastal town of Le Coq-sur-Mer for the rest and reconsideration of future plans. On hearing that Nazi newspapers had put a price of $5,000 on his head, Einstein quipped, quote, "I did not know I was worth so much." Unquote. Nonetheless, The death threats were serious. During his stay at Lecoq, the Belgian government assigned 2 24-hour bodyguards to protect him from a reported Nazi assassination team. When the Hitler regime issued an official book of photos of enemies of the state, the caption under Einstein's photo read, "Noch ungehängt," not yet hanged. Einstein was also wanted, but alive and thinking, by leading institutions of learning around the world. Several European universities, including those in Oxford, Paris, Madrid, and Leiden, offered Einstein faculty positions, as did the newly established and well-funded Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton. Note: designed from the start as a center exclusively for theoretical research, the Institute and its founder, Abraham Flexner, hoped to attract the most outstanding scholars from around the world to live, think, and do research at the IAS, which, although located in Princeton, would be independent of the university. Besides their obvious differences, the Institute was not a degree-granting institution and had no students. One other key policy difference central to this story is that the IAS, unlike Princeton University, welcomed Jewish scholars from around the world. To a large extent, the Institute reflected America's emerging status as the leading financial and technological power in the world. Einstein was the Institute's most valuable asset, earning its immediate recognition and international prestige. Einstein felt at home in Europe, but, as author and physicist C.P. Snow explains, the choice of where to settle was, to a large extent, out of his hands. He was himself Hitler's greatest public enemy. He was a brave man, but if he returned to Germany, he would be killed. Belgium suited him. He was more comfortable in small, cozy countries. Holland was his favorite. But he wasn't safe from the Nazis. Unwillingly, he set off on his travels again and moved to Princeton. It was a kind of exile. There's no doubt that he, who had never recognized any place as home, sometimes longed for the sounds and smells of Europe. Nevertheless, it was in America that he reached his full wisdom and his full sadness. Before leaving Germany, Einstein was not only an outspoken critic of the Nazis, but he had begun to speak out against racism in America. The parallel to Nazi anti-Semitism and the Aryan Superman theory was hard to miss. In 1931, W.E.B. DuBois, a founder of the NAACP and editor of its magazine, The Crisis, wrote to Einstein, still living in Berlin, "Sir, I am taking the liberty of sending you herewith some copies of The Crisis magazine. The Crisis is published by American Negroes and in defense of the citizenship rights of million people descended from the former slaves of this country. We have just reached our 21st birthday. I am writing to ask if in the midst of your busy life you could find time to write us a word about the evil of race prejudice in the world. A short statement from you of 500 to 1,000 words on this subject would help us greatly in our continuing fight for freedom. With regard to myself, you will find something about me in Who's Who in America. I was formerly a student of Wagner and Schmoller and the University of Berlin. I should greatly appreciate word from you. Very sincerely yours, W.E.B. DuBois." Einstein replied on October 9, 1931, "My dear sir, please find enclosed a short contribution for your newspaper. Because of my excessive workload, I could not send a longer explanation. With distinguished respect, Albert Einstein." The February 1932 issue of The Crisis featured the following article. A note from the editor, Dr. DuBois. The author, Albert Einstein, is a Jew of German nationality. He was born in Württemberg in 1879 and educated in Switzerland. He has been professor of physics at Zurich and Prague and is at present director of the Kaiser Wilhelm Physical Institute at Berlin. He is a member of the Royal Prussian Academy of Science and of the British Royal Society. He received the Nobel Prize in 1921 and the Copley Medal in 1925. Einstein is a genius in higher physics and ranks with Copernicus, Newton, and Kepler. His famous theory of relativity, advanced first in 1905, is revolutionizing our explanation of physical phenomena and our conception of motion, time, and space. But Professor Einstein is not a mere mathematical mind. He is a living being, sympathetic with all human advance. He is a brilliant advocate of the disarmament and world peace, and he hates race prejudice because, as a Jew, he knows what it is. At our request, he has sent this word to the crisis with Ausgezeichneter Hochachtung, distinguished respect. To American Negroes, it seems to be a universal fact that minorities, especially when their individuals are recognizable because of physical differences, are treated by majorities among whom they live as an inferior class. The tragic part of such a fate, however, lies not only in the automatically realized disadvantage suffered by these minorities in economic and social relations, but also in the fact that those who meet such treatment themselves, for the most part, acquiesce in the prejudiced estimate because of the suggestive influence of the majority, and come to regard people like themselves as inferior. This second and more important aspect of the evil can be met through closer union and conscious educational enlightenment among the minority, and so an emancipation of the soul of the minority can be attained. The determined effort of the American Negroes in this direction deserves every recognition and assistance. Albert Einstein. For the complete text of the DuBois-Einstein correspondence, see Part 2, Document A. DuBois' request for a message from Einstein revealed that the African-American scholar had a flair for public relations. Einstein's article brought the crisis a rare, if small, headline in the New York Times. Einstein hails Negro race. Nearly 20 years later, another Einstein-DuBois correspondence would bring even more momentous results, but in the fearful 1950s, there would be no press coverage. On the eve of his move to America, Einstein joined the international campaign to save the Scottsboro Boys, 9 African-American teenagers from Alabama, falsely accused of rape. 8 of them were sentenced to death in 1931. For Einstein, the Scottsboro defense was the first of several protests against racial injustices in the American legal system. For J. Edgar Hoover and his FBI, it was the first communist front listed in Einstein's file. But that is jumping ahead of our story. Chapter 2. Paradise. Princeton seemed like another world to Einstein when he and Elsa arrived in October 1933. The small town's most striking first impression had to be the contrast with Berlin. The absence of gangs and swastika armbands roaming the streets, beating up Jews and gypsies, attacking left-wing and trade union meetings, and smashing shop windows. Princeton promised to be a safe haven, a banishment to paradise, Einstein wrote in a letter to a friend. There was also a stuffiness to Princeton, emanating from the cluster of old, elite families and society people. Einstein would later describe it as a quaint and ceremonious village populated by puny demigods on stilts. Nonetheless, he was clearly affected by Princeton's surface serenity. Quote, "Into this small university town, the chaotic voices of human strife barely penetrate. I am almost ashamed to be living in such peace, while all the rest struggle and suffer." Unquote. When people think of Princeton, they think of the university, which is world-famous, Ivy League, rich, and conservative. One doesn't really think of the town. Actually, there are 2 Princetons. The central part is a borough, about 1.7 square miles, with a population today of around 14,000. The borough is surrounded by a larger township. Both Princetons are pretty and quiet and natural-looking and green, and each exudes a definite charm. Nassau Street, the borough's biggest and widest thoroughfare, separates a downtown commercial area from the university. The shaded campus, with its old trees and classic 19th-century buildings, stretches out in the distance. It is easy to think of Princeton as some nondescript little college town. In some ways, this may be. But if you're in the borough long enough, you can begin to feel that America began in Princeton. George Washington slept there. and it was the site of a battle considered by many to be a turning point in the Revolutionary War. Princeton's early European settlers resided along a large stream. This stream was also a life source for the Lenni Lenape, the Native American group that had long lived in the region. They called the stream Wappawag. The Europeans called it Stony Brook. The Lenape were nomadic and didn't believe in the concept of individual landowning. But European settlers quickly discovered the land was fertile and excellent for farming. Their settlement grew rapidly. Princeton, originally Princetown, was either named after William, Prince of Orange of the House of Nassau, or was so named as a sister city of Kingstown, today Kingston, which is not far away. Location also played a role in the town's development. Approximately the same distance from Philadelphia that it is from New York, Princeton became a popular overnight stop for those traveling by stagecoach. From its inception, the university played a fundamental role in the town's development. Like a magnet, it attracted people, money, and business. At its founding in 1746 in Elizabeth, New Jersey, it was called the College of New Jersey. The school moved to Newark in 1747 and finally to Princeton in 1756. The wealthy, powerful, and prominent individuals who ran the school often ran the town as well. In the history of Princeton, the name Stockton is pervasive. The family estate Morven, a museum now, is a permanent reminder of their presence. History made the name Richard Stockton an important, if confusing one. Richard became an extremely popular name in this family. Several were well known beyond the borders of their birthplace. One Richard Stockton, a Mississippi state judge, was killed in a duel at the age of 31. A Richard Stockton Field was a U.S. senator from New Jersey. However, at least 3 Richard Stocktons made fundamental contributions to Princeton's, and in some ways the nation's, legacy. Historians consider the original Richard Stockton, for descriptive purposes, Richard Stockton I, to be the founding father of the town. He bought 6,400 acres of land from William Penn in 1696. The borough of Princeton is located almost in the middle of the land he purchased. He transformed a huge tract of land into a thriving farm that exponentially added to the family's power and wealth. His youngest son, John Stockton, initiated a family conversion from the Quaker to the Presbyterian faith in the 1750s. After personally donating 40 wooded acres, he, along with 3 others, contributed £1,000 to help the College of New Jersey move to Princeton. John Stockton's eldest son, Richard Stockton II, a member of the first graduating class of what would become Princeton University, built the Stockton palatial estate called Morven, which in the 1950s became the official home of the governor of New Jersey. It was designated a museum in 1981 and opened to the public in October 2004. A successful lawyer and signer of the Declaration of Independence, Richard Stockton II was one of the tragic heroes of the Revolutionary War. Captured by the British, he died in 1781, never physically recovering from a brutal confinement. One of Richard Stockton's sons, Richard Stockton III, also known as the Duke, represented New Jersey in the U.S. Congress. One of the congressman's sons, Commodore Robert Field Stockton, a naval officer, helped set up a government in California after the Mexican-American War and was active in the Colonization Society, a 19th-century effort to repatriate American blacks to Africa. Later, the Commodore also became a U.S. Senator from New Jersey. Note: at the beginning of the 19th century, some began to feel that the most humane and/or expedient way to deal with the issue of racism in America was to send African Americans back to Africa. This belief spurred the birth of an organization that eventually became national called the Colonization Society. According to the Journal of Negro History 2, number 3, the formation of the American Colonization Society on November 6, 1816, Eucris Beatty and Robert Finley led the first colonization meeting ever held in this country, which was in Princeton. See John F. Hagman, History of Princeton and Its Institutions, Philadelphia J.B. Lippincott, 1879. In 1748, John Belcher, governor of the province of New Jersey, decided to make education a major focus of his administration to better enlighten the minds and polish the manners of this and neighboring colonies. After some dispute as to location, he settled on Princeton as the final location of the College of New Jersey. Governor Belcher felt Princeton was as near the center of the province as any, and a fine situation. Philadelphia architect Robert Smith was commissioned to create a building for the college. Smith built Nassau Hall, at the time the second largest stone building in the colonies. It housed an entire college, classroom, dormitory, chapel, library, and refectory. Nassau Hall became a model for buildings at Harvard, Brown, Dartmouth, and Rutgers. The college opened its campus in 1756. It changed its name to Princeton University in 1896. The college's president, John Witherspoon, was both a great patriot and one of the individuals very much responsible for making the College of New Jersey one of the most prestigious schools in the nation. Witherspoon was born in Scotland. He graduated from the University of Edinburgh, one of the most respected institutions of learning in the world at the time. An ordained minister, he became a widely known leader of the Evangelical or Popular Party in the Church of Scotland. Witherspoon's dynamic and extemporaneous speaking style mesmerized audiences. It was said in his time that only George Washington was more charismatic. Sought after and recruited for over a year, finally convinced by notables such as Benjamin Rush and Richard Stockton II, Witherspoon arrived in Princeton with much fanfare in 1767 to become the school's sixth president. Upon taking the position, he quickly realized that the college needed money. He traveled through the colonies, but primarily in the South, soliciting funds and recruiting students. Colleges were somewhat different in the 18th century. Much smaller than now, institutions of higher education mainly trained clergy. During Witherspoon's tenure, the school employed only 2 other professors and 3 tutors. Witherspoon, in addition to managing the school's affairs and preaching twice on Sundays, carried a heavy teaching load and broadened and enriched the school's curriculum. He reportedly was the first person to use the word campus to describe college grounds. Under Witherspoon, as future U.S. President Woodrow Wilson later said, Princeton became herself for a time, the academic center of the Revolution. An extraordinary number of Princeton graduates became notable statesmen: 21 senators, 39 representatives, 12 governors, 3 Supreme Court justices, and 1 vice president, Aaron Burr, Jr., and a president, James Madison, all within a period of about 25 years from a college that seldom had more than 100 students. 9 Princeton men were delegates at the Constitutional Convention, and 5 of those were Witherspoon students. Witherspoon himself became a signer of the Declaration of Independence. While Witherspoon was president, a pivotal movement in the Revolutionary War occurred in Princeton. From 1775, almost to the end of 1776, the ragtag Continental Army, led by George Washington, was in continuous retreat. The British chased them from New York to the eastern part of Pennsylvania. For the colonial soldiers, rain, mud, hunger, cold, and lack of adequate shoes and clothing wreaked more havoc than enemy bullets. As the Continental Army crossed the Delaware into Pennsylvania, they were so weak and tattered that Washington wrote, "I think the game is pretty near up." The British commander, Sir William Howe, decided to send his army into winter quarters. Howe was willing to wait until spring to kill any Continental soldiers who survived. Realizing this, Washington stopped running and planned an attack. Hessian soldiers, German mercenaries hired by Britain, manned an outpost in Trenton. Washington planned a surprise attack on the day after Christmas. At 8 a.m., as sleet fell, Washington's troops and artillery came from 3 different directions, totally surprising the Hessians. the Continental Army achieved victory in barely 2 hours of fighting that was fierce at times. The emboldened Washington wanted to continue the offensive. In an impassioned speech, he convinced his men to stay and fight, even though many of them were about to end their enlistments. On New Year's Day, they recrossed the Delaware only to be cornered by British troops. It was getting dark. The British commander, Lord Cornwallis, held off his attack, telling his officers, "We'll bag the old fox in the morning." During the night, Washington ordered a few men to stay behind to make campfires and noises as if they were busy building tents, while the bulk of his soldiers, using a little-known trailhead, headed toward Princeton, where 2 British regiments cut off from the main force were located. As day dawned, Cornwallis realized the old fox had given them the slip. Soon he was informed that Washington had attacked in Princeton. At one point, the story goes, Washington, 30 yards from enemy lines, ordered his men to fire. They did, and the British responded in kind. Washington disappeared in the smoke. When the smoke cleared, Washington emerged unharmed, but his crushed adversaries were running for their lives, taking shelter in and around Nassau Hall. On that memorable day, according to Woodrow Wilson, there was fighting in the streets and cannon fire aimed at Nassau Hall. Washington, who only a few days earlier had been beaten and in full retreat after crossing the Delaware, defeated the British and changed the whole face of the war. A part of the story most people haven't heard is the black colonial Americans in the community of Princeton and beyond played a significant role in this critical victory. Several colonial African Americans, including many from the elite all-black 1st Rhode Island Regiment, fought in the battle. Note: the all-black 1st Rhode Island Regiment was composed of 33 freedmen and 92 slaves who were promised freedom if they served until the end of the war. They distinguished themselves in the Battle of Newport. However, the regiment was all but wiped out in a British attack at Yorktown. Black Revolutionary War veteran Oliver Cromwell recalled in the spring of 1852, at the age of 100, how Washington's army knocked the British about lively. Some of the fighting took place in Princeton's African-American community. 19 Hessian soldiers were killed on Witherspoon Street. For years after the battle, residents spoke of being terrorized by a ghost of a Hessian soldier who was killed in the fight. In these times, many African Americans ran from bondage, spurred by principles of democracy, equality, and liberty. A Princetonian who went by the name of Prime was one such individual. His owner, Absalom Bainbridge, supported the British. Bainbridge enlisted and served as a physician to the Loyalist troops stationed in Long Island. Prime, forced to travel with his owner, bolted and returned to Princeton. There he was advised to join the Continental Army, which he did with the hope that his service would earn him freedom. However, after the war, Prime was not legally released. He lived in a quasi-free existence until 1784, when he was captured by slave hunters. At that time, his legal representatives filed a petition for manumission. Prime's lawyer argued that Absalom Bainbridge had lost all property rights when he became an enemy of the state and joined the British Army. The court ruled in Prime's favor, and he was finally freed. What happened to him afterward is a mystery. To date, no records have surfaced that document his life. Princeton slave owner Absalom Bainbridge, on the other hand, rented a house in 1774 from Job Stockton, a brother of Richard II. Though it was confiscated when he joined the English in the war, today his landmark house still bears the Bainbridge name. Named after Absalom's son, William Bainbridge, a hero in the War of 1812, it is now the home of the Princeton Historical Society. Quote, "No college has turned out better scholars or more estimable characters," George Washington wrote after the War of New Jersey's illustrious school in Princeton. He was a lifetime supporter, even though his stepson was expelled from the school. Another U.S. president, James Madison, lent his support to the school by coming to the campus and helping to raise funds. In the second half of the 19th century, Two of Princeton's university presidents made important contributions to the school and the community. John McLean, Jr., the only Princeton president who was a bachelor, played an instrumental role in the development of the town's public school system, and in the 1880s, James McCosh, a Scottish-born Princeton president, focused on constructing impressive buildings that made the campus one of the most beautiful in the country. In 1902, a former student who was now the school's most popular and highest-paid faculty member was elected unanimously to be Princeton's president. Though a Presbyterian and son of a minister, Woodrow Wilson was the first Princeton president who was not a clergyman. He is credited with modernizing the school. Many of the reforms he instituted have become standard in higher education. In his first report to the trustees, Wilson proposed a $12.5 million program to transform Princeton into a full-scale university. At the time, this was a staggering sum, but the trustees approved it immediately. Wilson created administrative departments of instruction, with the heads reporting to him. He instituted the now common system of core requirements, followed by 2 years of concentration in a selected area for students. Wilson left Princeton in 1910 to run for and win the governorship of New Jersey. 2 years later, he was elected President of the United States, the first and still only U.S. president to have a Ph.D. Wilson was also the first Southern president since the Civil War. When Albert Einstein first visited the university in 1921 to lecture and receive an honorary degree, John G. Hibben, Woodrow Wilson's successor, was the university's president. He has often been described as more of a coordinator and mediator than a dynamic leader. By 1933, the year Einstein moved to Princeton, Harold W. Dodds was just beginning his Princeton presidency. Dodd's long tenure would last until 1957, 2 years after Einstein's death. Einstein may have been aware of the quantity and quality of history and the historical figures who preceded his arrival. He may also have been surprised when he discovered another aspect of Princeton life. We can picture Einstein as he explores the streets of his new hometown, walking from the university to Nassau Street with its stores and student eateries, and making his way down Witherspoon Street. Perhaps Einstein first noticed the scarcity of well-paved sidewalks here, or perhaps the sudden presence of black people and the disappearance of whites. In either case, it doesn't take him long to learn that the black Princetonians lived in a separate community, send their children to a separate school, sit in separate sections in the movie theaters, and cannot enter most stores on Nassau Street. This is the other history of Princeton, one that is not usually cited in American history books. Benjamin Rush, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, the preeminent physician of his day, and a Princeton graduate, class of 1760, had this remembrance, quote, "In the days of Ezekiel Foreman and Alexander MacDonald, Princetown's main street was lined with shops and taverns, and the village had its own post office and an active middle class of physicians, lawyers, and tradesmen. There were regular market days, with sales of slaves, cattle, horses, and sheep. A daily stagecoach transported travelers between New York and Philadelphia, stopping in Princetown. Sales of slaves may have ended, but the plantation mentality continued to dominate Princeton's elite, both in the town and the university, not just for a few years or decades, but for another 100 years. This is the other history of Princeton, and it's not so pretty."
Context of White Supremacy. I just want to take like a few seconds to give gratitude. The Grandcestor, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. Woo! She said it all the time. Reading is more important than watching television. She said it all the time on this broadcast and many other platforms. She didn't just encourage reading. she read. I would regularly talk to her, even when you would, hear her do programs and such. She would be referencing different books, and I just got this book, and I just got this book, and check out this book, and read. She said that all the time, and then to recommend this book specifically. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. We are still learning. She is still teaching. Man, having quality reading, life feels so much better. I tweeted that. It was really unpleasant the last 2 months or however long we had to suffer through the last book. But wow, I am enjoying. And we can give even a little nudge to Mel, Dr. Welsing for sure, but our narrator Mel. We were not going to read this book. I was pretty sure we were going to read Dr. Huey P. Newton, Revolutionary Suicide, which is nothing wrong with that book at all. We might still read it this year. But that's the book we were going to read. And then I wandered to William Duffy Sugar Blues, which was mentioned in the book we just finished, Dr. Africa's work. I like that book, and we did a review of that book many years back, almost 10 years ago. I said, we should read that. Our narrator, she had all 3 books. She looked at them. She'd even done a little bit of the narration for Dr. Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide. Wow. Dr. Welsing, man, she knew how to recommend a book we should read. Einstein on Race and Racism. Woo! I'm so glad I was a little bit lazy and didn't read this book immediately in 2014 when Dr. Welsing referenced it, but wow, what a great selection. Even for right now, what a great selection. I even feel like we might be on time just at the very beginning. It's many reasons, but right at the very beginning of the text. Let's see if I can get the initial highlight. Let's see. There are many, but there we go. There we go. So this is right in the preface. That America's worst disease, and then they come down, racism in America depends for its survival in large part on the smothering. This book then aspires to be a part of a grand unsmothering. Now, Dr. Welsing mentioned this book in 2014, literally days before Eric Garner, I Can't Breathe. Days before that, the audio clip we heard at the beginning was in, I believe, May, either May or right at the beginning part of June. I think right at the early part of June of 2014. Eric Garner was a month later, so it would have been right on time if we read it then. Right on time right now. I Can't Breathe in the system. I mean, smothering on many aspects, because that's what they say about COVID-19, a respiratory ailment. So we got the disease. Same thing I've been saying the whole time. The sickness. White supremacy. America's worst disease. Racism. White supremacy feels very, very on time. And for many other reasons. I took a lot of notes. Many other reasons. Feels like, oh yes. Loving it, loving it. Thank you so much, Dr. Welsing. The number 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. We have compiled a really impressive array of biographies here on the Context of White Supremacy. Also, make sure I get that in. I mean, I would run out of time and breath trying to name them all, but I mean, we had American Sniper, American Killer, Chris Kyle. We had Minister Malcolm X and Assata Shakur and Pitchfork Ben Tillman and Dr. Maya Angelou. I mean, we have done a lot of biographies over the years. Melba Patillo Beals, one of the Little Rock Nines, cowbell in there. But we've done a lot of biographies over the years here at the Cows. I'm sure there are even more than that, just, a few that I could think of briefly. But wow, reading is important. Another biography to add to our illustrious reading list here at the Cows Book Club. Alrighty, folks who dialed in, thoughts, observations from the first portion of the reading. Folks who have a hand up, line should be open. Feel free.
Hello?
Can I be heard? Oh, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm a female caller from Florida, and I'm really pleased to be reading this book with everyone on the book club. I wanted to talk about a line right after the one that the host pointed out about America's worst disease. And good evening to everyone. I forgot to say that at the beginning. Right after, in the preface where it says America's worst disease, it says the fact that Einstein wanted his views made public as possible has surpassed his historians. And in addition to the other things that make this a really prescient book to read right now, I think that just speaks to the deliberate nature of how the system is crafted and maintained. Right now, you have all these major organizations and companies and institutions behaving as though all of a sudden they get it. They're using all of the terminology that for years I've only heard on this program or on recordings from people like Nellie Fuller and Francis Cress Welsing and Amos Wilson and on and on and on. I've only heard some of the terminology that specifically explains what this thing is on those programs that have been considered, not mainstream or whatever other radical. All of a sudden, all of these organizations now are putting out documents using all of the terms, and I just feel like this book is showing how not only Francis Cress Welsing in 2014 or whatever year you said she first referenced it, but also going back to the 1900s and before, how much there's a deliberate effort to deceive and confuse. And the other point that is often made on this program and the different programs that you offer on different nights is that if the people in power were intending to solve the problem, they could do it in an instant. They put much more effort into being deceptive and confusing people. So I appreciate the effort that this program and others like it have provided for those of us who are trying to become less confused. I appreciate the fact that this book was brought to my attention and that we're going to be able to discuss it. And I will mute my line. Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, stay safe down in Florida. They said it's a COVID-19 hotspot, so yikes. Take it seriously. Caller Henry in Chicago. Good to hear from you, sir.
All right. Greetings, Gus, and greetings to all the callers and listeners. I was interested on why, you were talking about biographies, and we had also did Dr. Gerald Horne's book of Paul Robeson. In this book, Einstein has 2 chapters of Robeson. So I was kind of curious why Dr. Horne left out Albert Einstein's name. I mean, he mentioned a lot of names in his book, but Albert Einstein wasn't one of them. So I was real curious about that. In the first chapter, where it says, the first sentence where it says January 30th, 1933, the day the Nazis took over the German government. I was kind of curious about that word, took over, because Nazism was very popular in Germany. Obviously, we see in the preceding pages that that the Nazi Party basically got a lot of votes in the right tag for the German, Congress. So it wasn't like the Nazis took over the government, like they stormed the government and just did a military coup. No, they got the support of the German people who were, was basically racist and supported Nazism. And I point this out because if I can remember, there was this book was written by two people, a white author and a non-white author. And we got to understand too, sometimes we have to be careful about, when white people write about racism, because they can be deceptive on this. I mean, they may have some productive insights on it, but you still got to be careful about the wording that they use in this. On page 14, it says, for several years in the mid-1920s, public and anti-Semitism subsided, and the ultra-nationalists lowered their profile as the German economy steadied with substantial economic aid from the United States and England. But towards the end of the decade, the economy faltered, and a far right flexed its political and paramilitary muscle. Now, it kind of reminds me of what's going on today in regards to the economy faltering, but yet, we're seeing a lot more, and not to say that they haven't, that they fell in the shadows, but we're seeing a lot more white paramilitary people, obviously with the, anti-COVID or anti-stay-at-home protests with, the white paramilitary people storming the capitals of the states. For some reason or another, white supremacists get more aggressive when or they start buying guns, and obviously the gun sales basically show, they start preparing for some sort of, armed conflict when the economy goes bad. And it looks like the same thing happened in Germany during the Nazi time. And in regards to chapter 2, like I was stating before, we gotta remember that, white authors, even though there was a black author in this one, I think, white authors still, have created this book. But basically, chapter 2, I would have kept the first 2 paragraphs and the last 4 paragraphs. Didn't really need to know about the history of Princeton, like that in depth, as far as the Revolutionary War, what Woodrow Wilson, white supremacist president, has to say about former, Princeton grads or Princeton people, or, what happened in the Revolutionary War. So I thought chapter 2 was very wordy. And, like I said, outside of the first 2 paragraphs and the last 4 paragraphs, none of the paragraphs in between dealt with Einstein or racism. So, like I said, chapter 2 could have just been 5 paragraphs for me. So, but that's all I had on that.
Much obliged, Henry in Chicago. That is a good point. No snickering. We do have a white author, black or a white co-author, and a black co-author. I believe the white co-author, that is Fred Jerome. The black co-author is Rodger Taylor. And I believe, important for the context of this reading, I believe the way it worked is the white co-author, Fred Jerome, went to the black co-author, Rodger Taylor, and said, hey, do you want to work on this book together, writing about Albert Einstein and racism? So if that's the way it works, that's just like Dr. Welsing would say with chess. White gets to initiate, white goes first, and we're in a system of white supremacy, so I suspect this white person would probably be the more powerful writer component in this writing combo. Could be an error, but either way, white co-author, very important to keep that in mind. As for, and super important point, I said it's a lot of biography we've read. we just read Dr. Horn's biography on Paul Robeson. Henry in Chicago pitched in and did quite a bit of the narrating there. I don't remember him mentioning any correspondence with Albert Einstein. That is a really good point. It might be white people have been so successful at obfuscating this information, maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't get this book, and the authors, they've talked about difficulties that they had in publishing this information and why this information isn't a greater part of, our understanding of Albert Einstein and that sort of thing. So maybe he didn't know. That might be a good question if we get him on the program to, do you know about this book, or how come he didn't come up in your commentary and references on Robeson? Excellent point. Let's see. Other folks dialed in with a hand up if you have commentary. If we have missed you totally, proceed. While folks are getting it together. Yes, ma'am.
Could I make another comment?
Let's hear it.
It's just in response to the previous caller. I do think it's an excellent and important point that often there are deceptive tactics used with with the things that they produce. However, sometimes they wrap truth within the deception, and it's really difficult and challenging for people to try to glean important information from it. So there is truth sometimes weaved in, and I'm just trying to figure out maybe with the chapter 2, because I did find it to be kind of going on and on and on as well, and I couldn't figure out what the importance was. And then I thought, well, perhaps it has to do with the institution of education and the role it serves in maintaining the system. Maybe that's why he's going into great detail to sort of set up how Princeton, and then there's a lot of other universities in this country and in other Western, white European countries that hold up these institutions as like pillars of importance. And it's like it helps in the conditioning and the programming and in the propaganda. I know that I had to take a short workshop on the Holocaust, and it was condensed, so I'm sure I didn't get everything. But one thing that the teacher who led that program did stress was how the Nazis utilized teachers in their system with their programming of, I think it was, I can't remember what it's called, but there was a unit of Nazis that was specifically for youth. It was like targeting young people, and they used teachers with a lot of the propaganda and the symbols and putting Hitler's face and all of that. So I'm wondering if maybe the author is trying to establish how institutions such as Princeton sort of serve a role in conditioning or in maintaining the system. So that was the point I wanted to make.
Much obliged. Much obliged. That is logical. Let's see. Other folks that dialed in that we missed totally, did you have commentary?
Can I be heard?
Greetings, Miss C.
Hi, Gus. Hi, listeners. This is the first live book club that we've been able to make, so I'm really excited. And I wanted to comment on the C-SPAN interview with both of the co-authors. We watched it yesterday in preparation for today's session, and during the Q&A session, one of the audience members asked the co-authors if they had a definition for race or racism. And I was very surprised because the black co-author, Taylor, he answered it first, but they seemed to be taken aback by it. And basically Taylor said something about it's like cultural oppression against black people, and then he said some other stuff. But what I found more interesting was what Jerome, the white co-author, had to say. He pretty much sidestepped answering the question by saying that there's no race. Like, race is a construct that we made up. and that he didn't want to answer the question because there's no such thing as race. And I think non-Clemson grad has some commentary or questions.
Hello, let's see. Unfortunately, we haven't gotten the book yet. We just ordered it yesterday. Hopefully it'll be here in the next couple of days, and we'll be far more prepared for the next book club. But, you know, we did know some of the things that were said. So, for example, one of the things that was said was the idea that the economic situation in Germany was one of the things that allowed the Nazis to take over the government during the 1920s. And I juxtapose that to the current situation we have right now, where because of the coronavirus, we have a large situation of large unemployment right now. And of course, just like the Nazis were able to come into power, I assume, like you've been saying over these last couple months and years, 4 more years. And then, you know, Dr. Welsing constantly talks about the fascism. And, you know, I think, what was the quote that she used here? Something about being racism or something about being... Say that again?
Fascism is end-stage white supremacy.
Yes, and with all the protesting and stuff that's currently happening right now, that's probably happening a little bit right now. It's the same kind of stuff that also happened in Germany as well, too. But I did find it also interesting that that Einstein also talked about he couldn't imagine living in a country, you know, as he was getting his life threatened. That he couldn't imagine living in a country without equality, and I couldn't help but to think to myself, then what the hell was he doing in the United States? Because the United States has never been a country of equality. Of course, I wonder how he would even define equality. You know, over the last couple of years, there's been multiple places, even where, including where we live, where someone might come up with their version of the article, 2 worlds, 1 black, 1 white, where, you know, we talk about, you know, white places are the places where all the government is invested in and the place is growing and developing, etc. But on the black side of town, you know, that's a place that's not getting any kind of investment. And, you know, in Einstein, you know, when he went to go explore the city of Princeton, clearly the same thing was happening as well, too. Obviously, there was the immediate campus and maybe the surrounding neighborhoods to the campus as well, too, as these lush, green, beautiful places. But then when he got to the black side of town, it was a completely different world. And with me personally, I find that pretty interesting because just like Dr. Welsing always says, you know, why reading is so very, very important. It seems that history is just really, really, really good at repeating itself. You know, me personally, maybe I'm young. I'm only, 33 years old, maybe. And, you know, sometimes, you know, you learn as you go. And you're lucky enough to read a book and you feel like you're finding something new. But, you know, as you get older, you start to realize the more you read and the more you read, you basically just see the same patterns that's constantly repeating throughout history. And instead of being someone who finally knows something, you're finally someone who's just come into know what most people who are older, like Dr. Welsing, already knew because she studies this stuff. And when yes, that's it for us.
Much obliged, Miss C, non-Clemson grad. I posted the video that Miss C referenced, the C-SPAN interview with the co-authors. It's like maybe a little more than an hour. I would encourage folks to check it out. That is very interesting. Like, even if I hadn't read any of the book or anything, or if I hadn't heard Dr. Welsing talk about it, if I had just watched that, just like the first 15 minutes of that alone, we'll have like, wow, this is a fascinating book. I need to check this out. And then definition of racism. How do you write this book? The title of the book is Einstein on Race and Racism. Again, my elementary school teacher We're talking third grade. This is not, nuclear physics. We don't have to get that advanced. This is like, we don't even have to get to fifth grade yet. We don't even have to get to multiplying too tough. She just said, hey, you don't use words if you don't know what they mean. Not rocket science. How do you write? And this happens all the time. We've had a number of authors who come on this here broadcast, white and non-white. The white people, conclude that they're probably deliberately practicing racism, but lots of victims, they write big, thick books about racism, sometimes bestsellers and win awards and all that. Do you have a definition for racism? Nope. If you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything else will confuse you. Wow. Worth watching the video just for that exchange alone. Man, that was music to my ears. Like you've been saying for months, well, really to be technical, years, 4 more years. Especially after you read a few chapters. Oh, yeah. 4 more years. No doubt about it. Other folks who dialed in that we missed totally, proceed. Thomas in New York. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Gus. Good evening to the callers. A pleasant surprise. Albert Einstein. I was under the, I spoke to the firefighter. He said, Huey P. Newton. I was like, oh, another Dr. Africa book. But he said, called me before the show and said, it's going to be Albert Einstein. I said, oh, this might be a little bit better. I think Albert Einstein is like one of the pure embodiments of the system of white supremacy. This guy is so revered because he's white and considered to be a genius. But I've never met anyone that has heard of a genius who's been so wrong on all the science that he's come up with that they taught us in school. It's all been, especially with the quantum computer, considered to be obsolete or never right to start with. Gravity to relativity to a whole bunch of other things. So only in a system of white supremacy is a wrong scientist, the greatest scientist ever because they're white, But I'm interested to hear more of his talk and see where this book goes. I can't really take a lot from the first reading so far. But so that's all I really have to add. Thank you.
We shall see. White people who are incorrect, mess things up. You can be president, all kinds of things. Genius. They don't even put the quotes on it. When they mention Jennifer Eberhardt, she's at Stanford. She's done all this wonderful research on racism and how white people implicitly associate black people with apes and gorillas. That she won a MacArthur grant, and they'll say, quote, genius, because it's called the Genius Grant. So they'll say, in quotes, genius. They do this with a lot of folks, but I know with her specifically, it's be ingenious. It's not, oh yes, genius, scholar at Stanford, Dr. Jennifer Eberhardt. They don't do that with Albert Einstein. He is a genius. No ambiguity. We are certain. Other folks that we've missed, if you have commentary, proceed. We'll give folks a second, see if we missed anybody. I'll share a few. Oh, try that again. Any other folks we missed totally? All right. Give a few notes and then we'll try again. Let's see. All righty. A few quick things with Dr. Welsing. If we don't like the book, we can blame Dr. Welsing, right? Since she said to read it, so we'll all, gripe at Dr. Welsing for suggesting this one. She was talking about Elliot Rodger in 2014. That was what that whole broadcast was about. And she was making an important point about how the narrative at that time, and continues to be, that he's a misogynist and he hated women and all of this and sexism is terrible. And she says, opposed to, wait a minute, this is a non-white male who had a white parent who talked extensively about being rejected, not accepted as white, particularly being rejected by white women, talked about his disgust for black males. Like, how is all of that ignored? And she talked explicitly about the deliberate removal of that truth, not talking about the denial of white supremacy, racism, and white people doing that deliberately. That's how she made her tangent to move from that to, oh yes, you should read Einstein on Race and Racism, because you got the same thing here with their white genius deliberately removing his commentary and what he had to say, commentary with Paul Robeson and W.E.B. DuBois, taking all that out of the public discourse so people don't think about that when they talk about Albert Einstein. That deliberate obfuscation, that is a regular tool of white supremacy. Let's see. The paragraph says, one explanation for this historical amnesia. I thought that was talk about remembering that this is a white co-author. Interesting word choice. That is a metaphor. One explanation for this historical amnesia. Deliberate white supremacy. It's not amnesia. You didn't forget. It's not amnesia. No. Which they say repeatedly. It wasn't that people forgot about this information. It was, we don't want to talk about this information. You're not supposed to talk about this information. We are redacting this from the record. That is very different. See, this, you get back into that white people are ignorant and we just forgot and we're not aware and we don't know. That's general white obfuscation, master deceivers. And they say, it continues, one explanation for this historical amnesia is that Einstein's biographers and others who shape our official memories felt that some of his controversial, and they got that in quotes. That's why I say they don't have genius in quotes, but they got controversial in quotes. Now it would be militant, extremist. Friends such as Robeson and activities such as co-chairing the anti-lynching campaign, which is apparently still controversial, might somehow tarnish Einstein as an American icon. That word tarnish is in Mr. Fuller's word guide, suggested not to use. He goes on talking about the ivory towers, white people. And then he even gets to the bottom. Why drag a somber ring cloud across a bright blue sky? Metaphors. All with blackening, dark day, muddy up things, talking about the Negro problem. Let's see. Continuing, this reminded me of medical apartheid. Harriet A. Washington had the portion at the beginning of that book, Top 5 All Time, where she said white people tried to discourage her from writing this book. Like, why are you talking about? Same thing, just obfuscate. We don't want to bring this up. Why are you dirtying up, clouding the blue sky? Why are you doing all this, Harriet Washington? But he says here, despite Einstein's clear intention to make his politics public, especially his anti-lynching and other anti-racist activities, the history molders, white people, have seemed embarrassed to do so. I don't think embarrassed is the correct word, or nervous. I had to think about my board, a museum curator who doesn't want his name used even today, stated while explaining his omission of some of the scientist's political statements from the major exhibition celebrating Einstein's 100th birthday in 1979. So you have an exhibit in 1979. This book is published in 2006. So what is that? If my math is all right, 25 years approximately, 26 or so. A quarter century passes. No, we didn't want to include all that Negro stuff, talking about racism in there, white man says, we didn't want to include all that in the birthday celebration. And matter of fact, I don't even feel comfortable about talking about it. Matter of fact, don't even put my name in there that I talked to you about all this. Forget my phone number. Like, you can't be ignorant. That's not ignorant, and that's not amnesia. That is exactly what we have said. What is Mr. Fuller's quote? White people cannot be ignorant about racism, white supremacy. They will get in trouble with other white people. that's what this sounds like. Don't you put my name in that book that I told you anything about this. I didn't talk to you about nothing. That's not ignorance. I'm following the rules of racism, white supremacy. That's not amnesia either. Next, America's worst disease. Get that in. America's worst disease. Racism in America depends for its survival in large part on the smothering of black people specifically, and people who talk about racism, white supremacy. He goes to the acknowledgments. He was going through the acknowledgments, and I said, oh, wow. He gives a shout out to Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, guest on the Context of White Supremacy, June 2010. It was 10 years ago. That's crazy. We talked about her book, The History of White People. That's a cowbell there as well for Dr. Painter, but saw that, and I think she's retired now, but I think she taught at Princeton. I think she might be emeritus status at Princeton. Man, after the last book we read, I had a hearty chuckle when we got to this point. He said, special thanks to John Stachel and Dorothy Zellner for meticulously and caringly correcting errors in our earlier drafts. Amen. I have not picked up any spelling errors. I haven't had to cringe. Like, does he mean mortality or morality? I haven't had any of that. Things have been spelled correctly. No typos. Editing is appreciated. And then he gets Audra Wolf, our diligent editor at Rutgers University Press. And last but furthest from least, to Michael Denini, whose editorial assistance was magical. Seems like they had a lot of editors for this, so it shouldn't be any typos and errors. I didn't remember any shout-outs to editors in the last book that we read. Let's see. Next would have been great definition for racism in this text. Didn't get it. It reminded me so much of right now, like you could substitute Nazi street gangs for the Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, whatever other names you want to call them, and that's what we got right now, 2020. Like, wow, I said there's a whole lot of reasons as we were going through this. I said, what great book to be reading right now. Thought that was a great point as well by non-Clemson grad, that the Nazi party seized power. Like, no, they represented the will of the German people. Like, that's what happened. Like, use correct language. Like, we believe in racism, white supremacy. Heil Hitler, give the salute. This is not some coup d'etat, where the people's will has been thwarted. That's not it at all. Like, use correct terms. Let's see. The label of you're a communist, that seems to be a broad tool in the system of white supremacy. Said they were calling Einstein communistic in Germany. They do that a lot for niggers that they don't like, especially if you're talking about racism. You're an outside agitator or communist of some sort. Let's see. So they got all their literature back and forth between he and DuBois. DuBois publishes his letter in the Crisis magazine to American Negroes, this letter from Albert Einstein, where he writes, it seems to be a universal fact that minorities, especially when their individuals are recognizable because of physical differences, are treated by majorities among who they live as an inferior class. Man, if Albert Einstein had been on this program, I would have hit the buckets and buckets of word button. Like, you are a genius. Make it plain, brother. That's supposed to be one of the components of being a genius. You should be able to explain your concepts so that people understand what you're talking about. Treated by majorities, do you mean mistreated by individuals classified as white? Oh, I got it. We got all this mumbly jumbly. Like, come on, man. Come on. You sound like the regular old race soldiers we talk to right now, 21st century. I did think it was important, he says a little bit lower, the tragic part of such a fate, white supremacy, however, lies not only in the automatically realized disadvantage suffered by these minorities in economic and social relations, but also in the fact that those who meet such such treatment should be mistreatment themselves, for the most part, acquiesce in the prejudiced estimate because of the suggestive influence of the majority. Even that is some not suggestive influence of the terrorism of whites. That's what you mean? Yes. And come to regard people like themselves as inferior. That right there. You recognize what happens in the system of white supremacy. It's going to annihilate that black self-respect, and you're going to think nothing of other black people, nothing of other non-white people. That's why Dr. Welsing talked about that. That's why you got an Elliot Rodger. Killed a whole lot of non-white people, killed 2 of his non-white male roommates and another non-white male. Talked a whole lot of anti-blackness about black people and anti-Asian commentary. Just all the beliefs of racist man and racist woman. He just absorbed them all, including how he felt about himself. That is the result of white supremacy racism. I thought that was really important. Mr. Einstein pointed that out. I think I'm going to use that so I can quote Albert Einstein. Victims of racism come to regard people like themselves as inferior. Now hang that on a quote and tell somebody. Now say something about that one. Next. On the eve of his move to America, Einstein joined the international campaign to save the Scottsboro boys, 9 African-American teenagers from Alabama falsely accused of rape. I don't know how many times we talked about that case. It's come up in the book club so many times, like Coretta Scott King. I think it came up in Gil Scott Heron's book. Talk about biographies. That's why I said we've read so many of them. But that the Scottsboro boys case has come up so many times in the book club. The raping black, well, it's not even, men, quote unquote, but the raping black boy, raping black child, raping black male, can't get away from. Even J. Edgar Hoover mentioned. Let's see. So chapter 2, there's quite a few folks who talked about bogging down in, all of this history of the University of Princeton. I'm not sure. I don't know. I thought of Dr. Nell Irvin Painter, right? She's at Princeton, so I was like, oh, okay. So I was a little bit thinking about this institution. And then as soon as I saw that it was going to go into some of the history, I said, oh, Woodrow Wilson, racist white supremacist. I was wondering now, how much detail are they going to get in about him and how much of an effort he made? Henry in Chicago talked about that, enforcing white supremacy staunchly when he became president, and certainly while he was president in New Jersey at Princeton University. So I was kind of clued in to think, what are they going to talk about the history of this institution? And before they got to all that, when they were talking about that, before we even get to all that, when they were going through the history and they said, talking about the family, the Princeton white family, they said history made the name Richard Stockton an important if confusing one. Richard became an extremely popular name in this family. Several were known well beyond their borders of their birthplace. One, Richard Stockton, a Mississippi state judge, was killed in a duel at the age of 31. Now, I mean, they talk about black people out in Chicago, What is wrong with the Negro? I don't want to hear about, Dylan Storm Roof and anniversary of who he shot. I don't hear about all that. And cops are racist. I don't hear about all that. Why don't you focus on black people and black on black crime? You all go out and shoot each other left and right. And I've been hearing that, for 10 years. Well, wait a minute. Maybe we picked up some of that dual culture. That was in Ben Tillman. Remember? Said we read a lot of biography. I said that. That was in Ben Tillman, Pitchfork Ben in South Carolina, where they talked about all that. Going out and dueling with somebody. You get them with the glove, remember, and smack them in the face. Pow! And I challenge you to a duel. And what kind of... Dr. Africa did say a whole lot, savage, barbaric culture. I mean, not that other people don't do nutty things, but I mean, it almost seems like they brag about this sort of thing, right? The dueling and brawling throughout their culture. Continuing. So now we get back to the history of Princeton. I did appreciate because they went through like, wow, you have got a lot of really powerful white people through generations, it wouldn't really matter which era, who have come through this institution, and the white people specifically attached to this institution. Like the numbers, when they rattle off the numbers of presidents and senators and judges, and it continues to be all the power that this institution wields. I know they were talking about taking down or moving Woodrow Wilson's, either he has a statue or I think he might even have a whole building there. He was president of the university and then president of the country. So, I mean, it's a big deal to change, that type of name. And they didn't do it. They fussed and stomped about this. This is back in like 2015 and 2016, but they didn't change the name. So I say all that to say I was it was a little wordy. I totally agree. It was a little wordy, but this is kind of a history book, so I wasn't totally surprised, and I did think that was important. This is what they call an Ivy League institution. Powerful whites. These are the presidents and what have you. Generally, where the Donald Trumps and such, this is where they come from. Race soldiers who lay out those plans for what the system of white supremacy is going to look like for the next 25 years. These are the type of institutions that produce those type of white people. So I did appreciate it for that, like the caller in Florida was saying. I reckon I'll pause there. Was anybody we missed totally who had a hand up, comments that they wanted to make sure they got in? Anybody we missed completely?
Greetings, Gus. Greetings to everyone on the line. Yes, I'm looking forward to the book, and I'm going to give extra attention to the theme person of the book, Albert Einstein. I can recall Dr. Welsing stating, well, first of all, Dr. Welsing, I can recall her asking her parents about for her to go to Germany, where she actually went to Germany and studied in Germany and studied the quote-unquote white people who call themselves Germans. And this was maybe, it was years after that particular war, and she observed people addressing each other by saying, "Hi, Hitler." It was after the war. Also, with Albert Einstein in particular, well, she also stated that Hitler didn't go after the people who call themselves Jews because of religion. It was because that they were determined to not be white. When they came to this part of the world, I could be wrong, but well, I'm going to state that they were considered to be white once they came to this part of the world. That is not new. White people have done that from time to time. They have done that from time to time through history. And in turn, he was indirectly, according to history, connected with the Manhattan Project, primarily from his original theory on, I think, atomic power. I forgot what E equals something, whatever that was. And also from that standpoint, I'm just curious about a lot of things about him on his direct or indirect connection with the atomic bomb, because we know on who that terrible device was dropped on. It wasn't dropped on white people. It was dropped on non-white people. So far through my studies, it was determined that he stayed away from, he wasn't really closely connected to the Manhattan Project, which was the means of manufacturing of building this device. But nevertheless, before it was being dropped, after it was dropped, I can never recall reading anything from Albert Einstein on his distaste for the dropping of that bomb on non-white people. So I'm going to, give some real good paying attention to how he is described in this book. And that's all I'd say for right now. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter. Did we have any other folks who had comments that they wanted to get in before we get to the second audio segment? If we missed anybody, or if you had extra tidbit to share.
Can I be here? Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. The metaphor, I believe, is racism is America's disease. I think it puts racism into a space where it can't be solved. You know, you can't cure a disease. You can cure a virus or an infection, not a disease. Once you get a disease, it's generally there. So it gives it that outlook that it can't be solved by saying that. And also, when was this book written, if you don't mind me asking, Gus?
2006.
Okay. Yeah, I find that white supremacists do this a lot, especially to Jewish people, Jewish white supremacists. Is they like to go back and make it seem like they weren't racist. You know, the one group of white people that, you know, you read books and things that aren't racist, it's always the Jews who had, but they don't show it in their lifetime. You know, it's always after the fact. So many of them, you know, and I'll be my mouth.
2005. Sorry, 1 year off. Henry in Chicago.
Yes. If anybody doesn't have the book, if you are associated with a university, you can actually get it through jstore.org and get it for free. Or, you know, if anybody needs a copy, I have it on PDF. So if you want to email me, if somebody's requesting it, I have a copy of it. And also, too, going back to Gerald Horne, and not to basically rag on him, because like I said, he's one of my favorite historians, but it's almost impossible. It's almost impossible to think that he didn't know about this because he got his bachelor's degree from Princeton. So, and he has a PhD in history. So, not from Princeton, but you know, he's a historian. So, like, he did his undergrad at Princeton. So, I'd be very interested if you ever got him on the show to ask him about that. So, that's all I have to.
I would be interested too. Like, that's one I would like to know. Like, did he, you know, because I mean, hey, everybody misses. Like, I haven't read anything. It's tons of books, and you know that could happen. Like, was he pressured? Like, yeah, that, you know, how did that happen? Like, that excellent question. Like, we should do that. Let's see if we can get him on. And yeah, let's ask. 2005. That book. His biography on Paul Robeson, I think, was published in 2016, so a good, you know, decade later. Like, inquiring minds. Good to have a little curiosity. Did anybody else have observations, comments they wanted to get in? Oh, person at 4757.
Hello, can I be heard?
Greetings, our narrator, Mel. Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay. I have to call back in. So my notes were as follows. In chapter 1, there's a section that says the Nazis flexed their paramilitary muscle during the economic collapse. And I felt like that related to some of the news channel coverage I've been seeing that blames the Black Lives Matter protests and the protest environment as a whole for the looting recently. I actually saw a news article circulating, and it was on Fox News, that basically the economy began to retract and go into recession this past February. And the current unemployment is higher than it was in 2008. But the protests and looting are basically being seen as synonymous by the news. I thought that was pretty important. Also in chapter 1, the idea occurred to me because I've heard a bit about Einstein before, and just how scientific advancement kind of moves around wars. So I thought that wars kind of make white supremacists rich, and they kind of give scientists funding. Some of the greater inventions that we have today are because of the leftover technology created during wars, like the internet and the cameras during the Cold War, or the computers and airplanes during World War II. And I think, to me, Einstein seems valuable to the U.S. Or the United States because they seem to anticipate a war. They were actively staying neutral, I think it said, and that they knew that they were going to need scientists and technology, but that he seemed disposable to the Nazis because he was Jewish. I think that to me, it represents a fine line between refinement and unrefinement that I want to examine. Let's see. Also from chapter 1, a so-called science seems to be important racist activity and employment space for the white supremacists. I recall that Black people and Native Americans are currently still trying to get their remains back from universities and laboratories and research facilities, the remains of their ancestral people. And these are institutions so-called filled with geniuses. They get all kinds of grants, government grants, and we're just sort of funding them to harbor these bodies. That's the thing that happens in science. So the fact that they're hiding this Einstein involvement with W.E.B, DuBois, and Robeson, it's long after the communist scandal with the FBI or the CIA files, it's not really surprising to me that they're still not talking about it. And in chapter 2, I think maybe unnecessary length was discussed, but the war story, I felt that was a brag story about Washington. I think that they could have described the war's influence on this environment in Princeton without the grandiose story about his superb military skills. And then also the Black people's involvement, the Black soldiers' involvement in the Revolutionary War in this pivotal battle was kind of summed up as they fought, but they didn't really list any of their specific contributions to that battle or anything. But I understand that it was just setting the scenery. I think that was part of the purpose. And I had another note about chapter 2. So it said that in 1902, Woodrow Wilson got the College Board to agree to $12.5 million of investment to make this college into a university. And I think that that's the equivalent of $360 million today. And I feel like for that amount of money, they could have paved the roads on the Black people side of town. That Einstein would have come along in the 20s and still seen an unpaved road, hypothetically. It's just insane to me. And I also think that if that's the money that the university got, then the town has to be filthy rich otherwise in 1900. So pretty much everything that happens to the Black people in the Witherspoon side of town, it can't be blamed on white inferiority or ignorance. These are rich white people after them just hoarding money. That's it.
Excellent point with the conversion for inflation. That's over $750 million invested. We want a state-of-the-art institution that is going to be exclusively for white people. I think at that time it would have been exclusively white men. Woo. And the niggers can't even get a sidewalk. That is the system of white supremacy. You can't even get a sidewalk, much less come to the university or get a degree, take a class. You can't even get your sidewalk. Get out of here. Get out of here. System of racism. And the George Washington. We had to hear about the fox. I mean, you can't. The system of white supremacy. We are all about killing. That's what you said. We get excited. Like, wow, my imagination is clicking all day long just thinking about the process of killing. We get to go to a war and do a whole lot of killing. Like, woo, creative juices are just running a mile a minute. We got to have some stories about the old fox, George Washington, cunning and sly as he was. I'm sitting here in Seattle, Washington, cherry trees in full blossom. Yes, we got to hear about the old sly fox. He outmaneuvered him. Anybody else? Quick comment before we get to audio segment 2. Bravo for Mel, doing a fantastic job. We have had Mel's cat has been with us. He offered a little purr when she was with us before to let us know he was there. And then he gave a little purr this time around in between chapters that he is still hanging in, has not mistreated any Black people, and still hanging tough. Our little, I guess, mascot for the context of white supremacy. Any other comments folks need to get in? All right. If you didn't get your additional comments in, just make a note. We will have ample time once the second audio segment concludes. So we are picking up the beginning of chapter 3. They called it Paradise at Princeton too. Like from Nazi Germany, that's in paradise. Even the niggers can't get sidewalks in paradise. Like, man, it's a tough world. Anywho, so we're picking up on chapter 2. So this should go into information. Oh yeah, Paul Robeson. Paul Robeson, Rutgers. Right down the road in New Jersey, Rutgers, Paul Robeson. So he's coming up in this chapter. Man, Gerald Horn, we got to get him on the program so we can ask. Reading, always great to be curious. So this is Fred Jerome, Rodger Taylor, one white co-author. Einstein on Race, and Racism, Context of White Supremacy, Chapter 3, The Other Princeton.
Chapter 4, Witherspoon Street. When they came to Princeton to make the movie IQ.
Incorrect chapter. Whoops, sorry about that. Hopped one chapter ahead. Get the correct chapter. Let's see. Yikes. Have to download. So, have to take 1 second. I thought I had done all that. I got confused about the file I downloaded. I'll take a second while I get all that together. We should be here tomorrow for neutralizing workplace racism. Let's see. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We will try to catch up. It has been another wild week. Seems like all of them have been in the system of racism, white supremacy, but we'll try and make the best of things tomorrow. Then we'll have the compensatory call-in Saturday, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. Catch up, current events from the past week. So much to discuss. We will be here, continue our theme of being global. We should be here Sunday. It'll be 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 o'clock Central, 12 noon Pacific. The Global Sunday Talk on Racism, White Supremacy. We will try to get a global perspective on the protests, the coronavirus, like wildest spring ever. We'll check in, be good. And they've had all those protests over there too, like in the UK and other parts of the world. So we'll check in with all the good folks where they are dispersed throughout the globe. That'll be Sunday, 3 Eastern, 12 noon. And then on Monday, we'll be here every day from now through next Monday. On Monday, Dr. Martin Kevorkian should be with us. We will discuss The Hate You Give, the movies. These are the movies. The Hate You Give. We read the book, but we were doing the movie. Formerly, worst book ever. Terminator, Dark Fate. What's the other two? Breaking 2, Electric Boogaloo, mentioned repeatedly with all the Boogaloo Boys and all that. And Black Mirror, Striking Vipers. Those are the 3 films, and then I guess 1 TV installment that we'll be viewing for this coming Monday, normal time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. The Hate You Give has been widely recommended. I just saw a news report today where they were talking about books to recommend for your offspring, or I guess younger people, classes, all that, to help them understand the protests and what's going on, all that jazz. And The Hate You Give is always mentioned. That was why we read it in the first place. So we'll be good to talk about that with Dr. Kevorkian this Monday. Terminator is not like, sterling cinema, any of the, portions of the franchise, but the newest one is not, but watching it for different reasons. Dr. Kevorkian, white man, admitted white supremacist. His book, Color Monitors, Blackface of Technology in America, is all about, it's all about racism, but Terminator is one of the main films that he dissects in that book, and we've talked about it many times over the years when he's come on the broadcast to talk about different films and all the like, but the new Terminator I thought would be good to break down with him, so we'll do that one if you want to take any time. If you have any free time between now and Monday evening, check them out. We will be ready to roll this Monday. File is, we got really high quality audio recording, so file is still rolling. As soon as we get him downloaded here, we'll upload and take off. We're just doing chapter 3 today. Looks like the chapters get a little bit longer as we go, so we'll do chapter 3 and then stop there for today, and we'll pick up next week for chapter 4. Much obliged as we get our set. I can't believe that. I can't believe I got confused. I thought I sat there and...
Can I ask something, Bucks?
Yes, sir. Thomas in New York while we're getting our act together.
Well, first is a question. Is that the Mexican Terminator? That one?
What? Oh, the Mexican Terminator? That's what I guess so. It's the newest one, the one where they land in Mexico City and they have to get across the border.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the Mexican Terminator. I said, damn, they got a Mexican Terminator before Black Terminator. And what the firefighter said, the Germans could not force the Jews to become white. How proficient is the American system of white supremacy, where they didn't even second guess it once they came here? I mean, they fought to be white once they came here. And the Nazis, so-called Nazis, which calling Einstein a socialist, Nazis are socialists, national socialists, Nazism, communal socialists, communists. I mean, it's still socialist. To call him a socialist was just, off key to me, because he came from that system to start with. But the Nazis themselves, they came here. That's why one of the reasons why they sent a lot of their scientists and things here to learn the American system of white supremacy and eugenics. They got a lot of their tactics and things from the professionals over here, and they went over there and implemented them. But that's all I wanted to add. But just if you look into that, a lot of those Germans, the Nazis, they got their whole playbook from the United States of America.
Much obliged, Thomas in New York. I think that is regular. Well, I won't say regularly, but that is accurate. I've seen that reported consistently, and they allowed a lot of the Nazi scientists to come over after the war, but even prior to that, lots of reports that white supremacists in Germany looked at a lot of the Scottsboro Boys happened in the 1930s, like well before Nazi Germany had erupted and all of that. I mean, that was like 1933, I think, 1932, somewhere in there. But anyway, they were looking at these policies. They already they are in the United States. They already had a eugenics program doing the forced sterilizations and all that. So there's quite a bit of exchange. We talked about that in Edward Baptist. The Half Has Never Been Told, how you would have plantation owners. They would exchange tactics about the best way to manage a plantation and the best torture techniques to use on controlling Negroes. So same thing, just happening on the international level. All right, I thought we were right there. A little bit more to go, and we'll get to chapter 3. As I said, I'm loving the book. I was greatly impacted by the last text that we read. So hopefully this one will continue as we get a little bit more detail on these. I feel some type of way about that word friendship as well. Like he says friendship with Paul Robeson and DuBois. Like, I don't know. Now, Paul Robeson did say that he had a lot of white friends. We talked about that when we read his biography, both here and when he traveled abroad. So maybe, he thought of Albert Einstein as a friend too. White friend. Anywho, I guess another thing perhaps to keep in mind as we're reading this, are we all like, no confusion? Everybody's certain Albert Einstein is accepted as a white person? No question mark about that? We all think, yeah, white people accept him as white, even if they didn't before. Now he is officially accepted as a white man. Everybody certain on that?
I'm with it.
Got one.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree.
All righty.
Can I make a appointment if it's still downloading?
It's still downloading.
I'm sorry, I gotta see if there's a way to make it file. All right. I had a point about chapter 1. I was thinking just off the top of my head that what Du Bois does when he writes to Albert Einstein makes sense to me. I haven't been participating in the protest because Welsing said stay home, and I was just saying to her logic, and it made sense. But I'm not judging people who are going out, but I haven't been participating. So I thought I'd make a list of things to do in addition to protesting, and I made a list of like 10 things with a draft. Again, it's not a judgmental list. You could do protesting and do these things also, or you could just do these things. I was just doing these things because I'm not protesting. But I thought that what he did by asking white people for resources or help or to write things for him about racism, I thought that that was a good idea. I think that's something we could do now. I don't know anyone German to write in Europe who is a scientist, but, you know, when I find one, I will support that.
Like a compensatory investment request, in my view, like asking for things that are constructive, that will help you, you know, solve the problem. And especially if they're willing to write something that's accurate. Now, I read the portion that he shared, where it was kind of convoluted, I thought, the minority populations and their treatment by the majority and all that. I mean, you know, it's doubtful that they're going to be accurate when they give you this commentary, but you know, hey, you could. He said they got a mention in the New York Times, like that probably gave the magazine a boost, and maybe some victims of racism get to hear about this problem and know about the magazine and all that. So, yeah, compensatory investment requests. Ask for things that are constructive. So we got the download. Now I will get it back uploaded and we will be ready to roll. Thanks everyone for your patience. Whew, man, oh man. We will be all ready next week since I already have chapter 4 downloaded, so we won't have all this nonsense for next week. Yikes. Man, oh man. All right, few more seconds. We'll make sure we had Black Experience Japan on the program yesterday. I'm super appreciative of having folks from different parts of the globe on right now just to try to get a better understanding of white supremacy, racism. There's so much confusion about everything, really. Don't even have a definition for racism. That even happened yesterday. Don't even have a definition for racism often. But trying to make sense of things as best we can. Hopefully being able to check in with folks in different parts of the planet. Hopefully that will help us get, you know, a slightly better grasp of what is happening and hopefully help us make better, more informed choices. But as I said, we'll be here Sunday for the Global Sunday Talk. If you could hang out Sunday afternoon and would like to get an opportunity to ask some questions, we should have some of our folks hanging in from London, I think Austria. I don't know if our Canada people will be hanging out with us, but looking forward to Sunday, in particular seeing, I don't think they were protesting when we spoke with them last month, but they have been. A lot of white people have been out in the streets pulling down. I think they pulled down a white slave owner statue and threw it in the harbor in Bristol, one of the places in the UK. I mean, clown show worldwide, but we'll check in with them about all that on Sunday. Take advantage and ask questions. I'm looking forward. And just, yeah, there's been so much happening in the planet. We'll be looking forward to checking with them on Sunday. Last few seconds here. Again, thanks folks for their patience. Make sure I get in as well. COWS Counter-Racist Yoga Retreat, Washington, D.C. Will be there August 5th through the 9th. As long as we don't have any more chaos with the Rona, year full of chaos, hopefully it'll at least be stable enough so that we can August 5 through August 9, nation's capital, do a little yoga, have some wonderful, delicious plant-based meals, counter-racist workshops, and hopefully get back home safely, no contagions or anything else, and feel a little bit relaxed and refreshed for the last half of 2020. But the retreat, August 5th through the 9th, you can visit my blog and get all the updated information, details, what we'll be doing, and all that good stuff. Looking forward to hopefully having a safe, emphasis on safe, yummy time in Washington, D.C. I don't know if they'll be protesting still by then. Who knows? Man, oh man. All right, so we're counting down, I guess, T-minus 10, 15 seconds or so, and we will get cracking. Yikes. That's why it's great to get all this done ahead of time. Narration. Man, I'd say all the time, like doing all the narration and reading, it is heavy lifting, just getting all that done and the audio together and the files uploaded and everything. Like, man, let's see. Is the file? Or did I speak too fast? I thought the file was there and then it looked like it was not there. We'll try again. See if we got it this time. Let's see. I know people said they had challenges even dialing in, just trying to make a phone call to get on the line. Like they weren't even trying to participate per se, just to listen, and they kept having lots of snafus. We had one listener who counted and said that she had 33 attempts and they all failed trying to dial in for the broadcast. I appreciated and commended her perseverance, but wow, I have had those days as well where it just seems like it is not working, interference of some sort, just as not allowing the phone call or whatever to work. That is so kooky. Now it does look like there's some interference. Okay, here we go. Let's see if it'll do right. It did seem like there was a little bit of interference with the file for a second. Let's try that again. Alrighty. Yay, now it looks like we should be T-minus about 15 seconds or so. Wow. Does not want us to finish the last half of the book, but we will persevere nonetheless. Woo! Let's see, anything?
That actually just happened to me. I was trying to call in, and I kept pressing, like, this one, I hung up, I called back in, and then I finally got through. But the first time I was pressing, I kept saying, hello, 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 and, like, I couldn't hear it. I switched to my headset, took the headset off, like, nothing was working. It was weird.
Thank you for sharing, Mel. That is very common. I myself have had that experience lots of times. I mean, like recently, lots of times trying to call in, and there's some strange failure. I said we just had the listener who wrote in who said she counted 33 times. She said she dialed in, and it kept failing. We've had that repeatedly over the years where, you know, just really odd things happen, but to be expected. Thanks, folks, for their perseverance, hanging out, being patient with the audio, and then the folks who've had to dial in a bunch of times to see if they could get on the line. Alrighty. So now, after much ado, we get to Fred Jerome and Rodger Taylor, Einstein on race. Even that, race and they could have just said Einstein on racism. Einstein on race. They could have just did one, but Einstein on race and racism. Race is racism. That's exactly what Mr. Fuller says. There's no reason to belong to a race other than to practice white supremacy, racism. But again, that audio clip, I'm going to make that the introduction for next week. The C-SPAN interview that the authors did, where the, I guess, participant in the audience asked about a definition for racism and they didn't have one. Very common, and oh my God, it was halfway there and then it failed. I'm gonna try one more time. What in the world? Like, that's just total ridiculous. Like, it was almost done. You know how it does the percentage? It'll be right at the end. It was right at the end and failed, and the file wasn't there. Like, woo! System of racism, white supremacy. So we'll try it again. See if it works. It was right there. I was ready to press the play button, and it, you know, flaked out on me. We shall see. Hopefully there'll be something really, really good. It's supposed to be the Paul Robeson chapter, so hopefully there'll be some really informative tidbits on this chapter. Maybe Dr. Welsing, if you can intervene for us and help us get this last little segment in, that would be super appreciated. Almost there, moving briskly. Do their superstition. Dr. Africa talked about all those rituals. I'll cross my fingers and see if it uploads completely this time. Almost there. Okay, no issues thus far. Let's see. Again, my bad. I thought I totally looked at it and thought I grabbed the correct file, and I guess I looked at the incorrect number when I was doing the upload earlier in the day. Paying attention to details. Super important. Let's see. No problem. Still doing correctly thus far. Let's see. I don't know if this is coronavirus related either. They said with so many people working from home, some things might take longer, or there might be internet crashes or snafus. Let's see. Did it work? Looks like it might have done so correctly this time. See if the file is there. Should be done. Says it did. It should be done. Yes. Yes. Alrighty. Woo! Thought I was going to pass out. Context of White Supremacy, second audio segment, Einstein on Race and Racism. My goodness.
Chapter 3. The Other Princeton. A writer to Harper's Monthly in the 1850s said that if in passing through New Jersey a traveler came to a place where there were 2 darkies to every white man and 2 dogs to every Negro, he might be sure he was in Princeton. Lloyd Brown, The Young Paul Robeson, 22. They say Witherspoon Street is named after the path that John Witherspoon took from his home to the university and back. In modern times, and for over a century, a walk north on this block, once an Indian trail, leads to the African American community. Before it was Witherspoon Street, it was Hill Road, also known as Rocky Hill, African Lane, or African Alley. Witherspoon and the neighboring Clay, McLean, Quarry, and John Streets look today like other parts of the town, sleepy and tree-filled. Some of the houses may be a little smaller, not as modern or pristine, but there's nothing to indicate that this little section has a history more like that of Selma, Alabama, than New Jersey. The black community was separated and set apart, Princeton public librarian Terry Nelson said, commenting on the historical social conditions in the town. At the same time, they were completely involved in the very fabric of Princeton's daily life. Paul Robeson, who was born in Princeton, called it the northernmost town in the South. There are black people today in Princeton who remember not being allowed in certain restaurants and not being served in certain stores. At the movies, they were required to sit in the colored section, and they had to go out of town to attend high school. Princeton was different from nearby towns like New Brunswick or Trenton, which surely had racism, but not such a long history of ingrained Jim Crowism. In New Brunswick, as one resident put it in the 1940s, you went to school based on your address, not your skin color. There have been tales that Princeton University was built with slave quarters on campus. Most historians believe there is no evidence of that. However, there is no doubt that the university, a bastion of intellectual thought, was at the vanguard of instituting and perpetuating harsh racial segregation in the town. Bruce Wright, a writer, activist, and former judge in New York's criminal court, who had developed a reputation during his 16-year tenure for his progressive and controversial rulings, was born in Princeton. In 1936, he received a full scholarship to the university, but was denied admission because he was African American. I had thought that I would attend Princeton University, Wright wrote. A scholarship arranged for me by one of my high school instructors had brought joy to a family that had no money. We were, after all, in the midst of the Great Depression. I stood in the registration line, full of hope. The sun was shining, and the green lawns of the university were beautiful to behold. In my innocence, I was untroubled when an upperclassman, an orange armband identifying his status, asked me to follow him to the office of the Director of Admissions. I was ushered into the presence of Radcliffe Hermans. This man of Falstaffian girth towered over me, light shafted through the leaded windows of the office. Herman stood there as though surrounded by a divine radiance. He was the first man to address me as Mr. Wright. His next words, however, would destroy much of the child and educate me beyond anything I would ever learn in a classroom. We did not know you were colored when the scholarship was arranged. From the time of John Witherspoon, the college had made a concerted effort to cultivate a relationship with the Southern elite. Perhaps because Princeton was farther south than Harvard, Yale, Columbia, or Dartmouth, this Southern strategy worked. A study of the decade of the 1840s showed that there was only 1 year when the percentage of Southern students at Princeton was below 40%. In 1848, it was as high as 51%. During the Civil War, 35 students died fighting for the Union and 35 for the Confederacy. Though several Southern Princeton students left the school in those heated, tension-filled days, the breakup was temporary. Princeton's Southern tradition blossomed again soon after the war was over. As a member of the class of 1928 put it, Princeton is popular through the school because it is the one Eastern school which does not enroll Negroes. The number of African Americans who attended classes at Princeton from 1756 to 1947 and received Princeton undergraduate degrees amounts to precisely 1. That would be John Leroy Howard in 1947. Note: nearly 3/4 of a century ago, a well-known Trenton minister, the Reverend Irwin W.L. Roundtree, who for many years was associated with the AME Zion Church, became the first Negro to earn a Princeton University degree. In 1895, the year before the College of New Jersey officially became Princeton University, Roundtree, a graduate of Lincoln University and Princeton Theological Seminary, received a Master of Arts degree from Princeton. In 1948, when the New Jersey legislature passed a law that forced the end of segregation in Princeton's public schools, the university, under the leadership of President Howard W. Dodds, took a stand against the legislation. Not surprisingly, Princeton was the last Ivy League school to integrate. Racism in Princeton and the victimizing effect it had on black people's lives did not begin with the university. Enslaved Africans, purchased from the Dutch slave traders, had been part of the early Stony Brook settlement. When Richard Stockton I arrived in Princeton, he owned at least 7 enslaved Africans. Years later, enslaved laborers built Morven, the Stockton family mansion. They also constructed brick slave quarters for themselves on the estate. John Witherspoon, a slave owner himself, reportedly had at least 6 African-descended students in his charge while he was Princeton's president. 2 of his colonial African students, John Quaymean and Bristol Yama, were being trained to lead groups of African Americans back to Africa, forerunning the colonization movement that began in Princeton and became widely popular in the 1820s. The advent of the Revolutionary War disrupted the plan, as well as Quaymean's and Yama's continued education. The best-known African-American student in the Witherspoon era, John C.O.W.S, began his Princeton education in September 1792. It was the Reverend John B. Smith who recommended that C.O.W.S receive a scholarship called the Leslie Fund, which had been set up that year for the education of poor students who would agree to work in the Presbyterian Church. Although C.O.W.S did not graduate, he is now on the official roll of non-graduates. He fulfilled the terms of the Leslie Fund and became a licensed Presbyterian minister, preaching extensively in North Carolina and Virginia. C.O.W.S was quite active until 1832, when North Carolina, alarmed by the Nat Turner slave revolt the previous year, forbade Negroes to speak in public under any circumstances. In earlier years, when C.O.W.S had a school in Raleigh, he is believed to have had both black and white students, unusual for an African-American teacher in North Carolina at the time. In Princeton, in the early decades of the 19th century, 80 or 90 blacks regularly attended services at the First Presbyterian Church on Nassau Street. They were allowed to sit only in the balcony. When fire gutted the church and the building was restored, a controversy ensued. A letter written by Dr. James Alexander, a Princeton professor and noted member of the church, explained the congregation's feelings. "We have a new and handsome edifice. While it was building, the Negroes worshipped apart, in a little place of their own. The majority of the pew holders wish them to remain a separate congregation. If they come back, they will take up about half the gallery. I am clear that in a church of Jesus Christ there is neither black nor white, and that we have no right to consider the accident of color in any degree. Yet I think the blacks very unwise in insisting on such a privilege now. Some years ago there would not have been the slightest difficulty in admitting them, but in consequence of the abolition movements, the prejudice of the lower classes of whites against the blacks has become exorbitant and inhuman. The black congregants were given the option to form their own church or be unwelcome in the newly rebuilt one. After intense negotiations, they opted for their own, largely funded by a loan from their former white congregation. They eventually named their new church Witherspoon Presbyterian. In the run-up to the Civil War, Princeton, like the rest of America, was divided. Though many hated African Americans and the war, There were those who supported the abolitionist cause. General David Hunter was one such individual. Also known as Black Dave, he became Abraham Lincoln's friend and an abolitionist general. In the spring of 1862 in South Carolina, Hunter was accused of raising and equipping a regiment of African-American runaway slaves. When the House of Representatives asked for an accounting, he responded, quote, "No regiment of fugitive slaves has been or is organized in this department. There is, however, a fine regiment of persons whose late masters are fugitive rebels." Unquote. At the time Hunter was assembling this force, the North was still pretending the Civil War had nothing to do with slavery. Up to this point, few blacks, if any, wore Union uniforms. When asked about the legality of his actions, Hunter replied, "I conclude that I have been authorized to enlist fugitive slaves as soldiers, could any be found. No such characters have, however, yet appeared within our most advanced pickets. The loyal slaves everywhere remaining on their plantations welcome us and supply us with food, labor, and information. It is the masters who have, in every instance, been the fugitives, rifles in hand, dodging behind trees in the extreme distance." On May 9, 1862, the general issued a proclamation that ended slavery in Georgia, Florida, and South Carolina. President Lincoln assured the nervous Congress that Hunter's proclamation had no official authorization. A longtime abolitionist, General Hunter was also a Stockton. His mother, Mary, was the daughter of Richard Stockton II, the signer of the Declaration of Independence. Because New Jersey did not form black, or as they called them, colored troop regiments, black Princetonians were forced to enlist in other states. Despite the inconvenience, after Lincoln's proclamation of emancipation in 1863, 22 black men from town joined the Union Navy and more than 65 the Army. The end of the Civil War and the ensuing years did not bring about a rise in status for black Princetonians. They were still largely unaccepted and unwelcome throughout the town. As a result, in the Witherspoon Street community you could find black-owned florists, beauty parlors, and clothing and candy stores. There was Griggs' Restaurant, Gray's Restaurant, and DePauw's Restaurant. Black Princetonians printed their own newspaper, The Citizen, created the colored YMCA, Elks Club, and even their own schools, notably the Witherspoon School. In 1858, the Witherspoon School for Colored Children, already in operation for a decade, opened in a larger building located on the corner of McLean and Witherspoon Streets. With its strong focus on academics, the school became an icon in the community, one where African American teachers would educate young black Princetonians for more than a century. The school's legacy, like much else in Princeton, was directly connected to the town's most prominent family, the Stocktons. Betsy Stockton is the person most associated with the founding, development, and success of the Witherspoon School. This dynamic woman, and perhaps the most unusual of the Stocktons, was an African-American member of the family. Born in 1798 in an era when most women were confined to family and home, Betsy Stockton was a traveler, an intellectual, a slave, a seamstress, a nurse, a writer, a teacher, and a leader in her community. Ashbel Green, who raised Betsy Stockton, called her wild and thoughtless, if not vicious, until about the age of 13. Her childhood seemed extremely difficult. Betsy Stockton may have been simmering with anger. Though Robert Stockton was her father, their relationship was shrouded in secrecy, because Robert Stockton's wife was not Betsy's mother. Her mother, Selah, was Robert Stockton's slave. Selah, soon after her daughter's birth, ran away from her child and from slavery. Betsy Stockton, at the age of 6, possibly as a part of the settlement of a civil case against Robert Stockton's estate, ended up as the property of Ashbel Green, who was the 8th president of Princeton University, and Elizabeth Stockton Green, Robert Stockton's daughter. Note: Ashbel Green was president of Princeton from 1812 to 1822. His autocratic and old-fashioned approach to his Princeton presidency incited several major student outbursts. During one, a gunpowder charge was set off in the main entrance of Nassau Hall, cracking the walls from top to bottom. After a dispute with the trustees about the tenure of his son, who was a faculty member, Greene resigned. Ashbel and Elizabeth Greene had no desire to keep Elizabeth's half-sister enslaved, and Betsy became a member of the household. Educator Ashbel Greene recognized that Betsy was quite intelligent and had the ability and desire to learn. By giving her access to his vast library and hiring tutors, Greene facilitated her education. At the age of 25, Betsy traveled to Hawaii as a missionary. Spending several years there, she easily learned the local language, founded a school, and discovered that her mission in life was teaching. After her experience in Hawaii, she spent a few years as an educator in Philadelphia, before returning to Princeton. When the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church opened in 1837, Betsy Stockton's name appeared first on the list of 92 communicants, an obvious reflection that she had some standing in the congregation. Betsy Stockton's major mission, however, was to establish an African-American school in the borough. She began teaching in Princeton in 1837, and her small one-room school eventually grew into the Witherspoon School. The force of Betsy Stockton's spirit and legacy in Princeton continued long after her death in 1865. Despite academic achievement by blacks, for the most part, white Princetonians remained as racist as ever. Many pined for the Old South and fervently believed that African Americans were incapable of coping with freedom. An article published in the university newspaper, The Princetonian, in 1895, entitled "One Result of the New System," reflects this view. Saunter down Witherspoon Street with me, friend, past the rows of tumble-down shanties and more tumble-down inmates. Let us walk on a short distance toward Rocky Hill and pause as we come to an abrupt bend in the road. The conglomeration of shingles, warped boards, mud, and stones which lies before us is too small for a barn and too large for a hen coop. It may be a house. Yes, there is the chimney, or rather what is left of it. Abraham, who lives there, is in the laundry business and believes in the division of labor. That is, he divides the washing between his good wife Hannah and his elder daughters, and divides his own time between the college offices, where he collects his drawbacks on washing, and the saloon. With its growing student body, campus, kitchens, and off-campus eating clubs, Princeton University increasingly became a source of income for many of Princeton's African Americans. The jobs were mainly labor-intensive and menial. Many of the men worked in those eating clubs on the avenue, Prospect Avenue, said Estelle Johnson, a longtime resident. They got to know some of those fellows, but that was as far as it went. Those students could talk to them and kid around with them, but the man still had to call the student Mr. So-and-so. A host of black Princetonians established entrepreneurial relationships with the university. There was William Sport Moore. His grandson, Donald Moore, recalls that, quote, "The students at Princeton were not given a lot of money, but they were given unlimited credit accounts at clothing stores. They would want to go to New York, so they would take their clothes to my grandfather, who would buy them. They'd take the money and go to New York and have a great time, and my grandfather would sell the clothes to whomever. And a lot of this stuff was brand new," unquote. In addition to selling clothing, Sportmore bought and sold student furniture. Kid Greene, reportedly the first black man to own an automobile in Princeton, made money taking care of polo ponies for the students. African American vendors had long been an essential part of Princeton campus life. Peter Scudder, perhaps the best known of these vendors, worked as a bootblack and sold apples and ice cream to college students in the 1840s. He accumulated some wealth and eventually became a property owner, an oddity then for an African American in Princeton. Scudder, commonly known as Peter Polite, owned a popular ice cream and confectionery shop on Nassau Street. Almost 20 years later, Jimmy Johnson created quite a stir when he arrived in Princeton as a runaway slave. Southern bounty hunters attempted to return him to captivity, but several Princeton residents interceded in his behalf and purchased his freedom. Johnson's wit and electric personality, as much as anything, saved him from a chattel existence. As an older man, in the 1890s, he was a campus fixture, selling candy and peanuts from a large wheelbarrow and entertaining customers and passerbys with his humorous tales. When Johnson died in 1902, Princeton students raised money to get a tombstone for his grave. Perhaps the last of the line of Princeton's memorable African-American vendors was William Taylor, somewhat derisively nicknamed Jigger. Taylor and his wagon were familiar sights as he sold his famous bacon buns, hot dogs, apples, and candy on Nassau Street and at all of Princeton's sporting events well into the 1940s. For the first 200 years of the school's existence, Alexander Dumas Watkins was the closest thing to an African-American teacher that Princeton University ever had. He was the only Negro who ever instructed Princeton undergraduates in their regular curriculum work. He did so for about 8 years. An expert in histology and biology, he, as the New York Times reported, was allowed to tutor some of the less intelligent students. Watkins' sudden death in 1903 came on the eve of a new wave of repression of African Americans in Princeton. The beginning of the 20th century brought a decidedly more racist climate throughout the nation, with parades by thousands of Ku Klux Klan members in the South and in other states, including New Jersey, where on Labor Day 1924, 10,000 Klansmen paraded through Yardville and Mercerville, and then on to Hamilton, where they held a public Klanvacation rally. Note: the Klan claimed more than 3 million members by the 1920s. See Life magazine's Century of Change. Boston, Little Brown, 2000. Even in Washington, D.C., the KKK was sufficiently powerful to parade unmasked in the shadow of the Capitol. Between 1900 and 1914, more than 1,100 African Americans were lynched in the southern states. In Princeton, the already racist atmosphere was exacerbated by Woodrow Wilson. Whatever else he may be known for in history books, Wilson was, to put it, simply a racist. Born in Virginia, 1856, Wilson demonstrated a nostalgic longing for some of the worst aspects of the antebellum South. When the movie The Birth of a Nation came out in 1915, thousands of people around the country were picketing because of the film's glorification and justification of the KKK. Woodrow Wilson, who was then President of the United States, arranged a special White House showing of the film. After seeing it, Wilson said, quote, "It's like writing history in lightning. My only regret is that it is also terribly true." Unquote. Wilson would buy peanuts from a black man, or let him shine his shoes, but under his leadership, Princeton's world of academia was no place for African Americans, and he wasted no time making this perfectly clear. A Woodrow Wilson story, widely believed in the black community, may not be true. Alice Satterfield, a longtime member of the Witherspoon Presbyterian Church, recounts it this way. Paul Robeson's father, William D. Robeson, was minister of our church for 20 years. That was a time of deep Jim Crowism, and his father was always fighting for the rights of Negroes. His son, Ben, Paul's older brother, was accepted at Princeton, but when they found out he was black, they rejected him. There's a story that Paul's father had a confrontation with Woodrow Wilson, who was then president of the university. Wilson talked to the presbytery, and Robeson was dismissed from his job and position as a minister. But Lloyd Brown, in his book Young Paul Robeson, indicates that it is more likely that William D. Robeson lost his ministry because of the Wilmington, North Carolina riot of 1898. Angered by years of black empowerment and interracial government, the former slaveholding community took steps to reassert its hegemony. The high point in the intimidation came in Wilmington, where an organized terror, personally participated in by the best of people, deposed by murder the city administration on the day following the election. After months of planning, buying guns, organizing, and whipping up race hatred, the assault came. Officially, 30 African Americans were killed. Many believe that the real number was closer to 300. The complete lack of response by local and federal authorities angered and galvanized African Americans throughout the nation. On November 29th, a large group of black Princetonians assembled at Witherspoon Presbyterian to meet about racial violence. Reverend Robeson was one of the main speakers. He and 2 others were chosen to be delegates at a follow-up event in Philadelphia. Apparently, this assemblage and call to action, even though they advocated nonviolence, offended Princeton's ruling establishment. The Black Presbyterian Church was controlled by an all-white governing body of local Presbyterians. On November 8, 1900, the Presbytery, as they were called, voted to oust Robeson from his church, despite his popularity with his congregation. Paul Robeson wrote the following recollection of his father, William D., in his book, Here I Stand. Quote, "Though a man of ordinary height, he was very broad of shoulder, and his physical bearing reflected the rock-like strength and dignity of his character. He had the greatest speaking voice I have ever heard. It was a deep, sonorous basso, richly melodic and refined, vibrant with the love and compassion which filled him." Unquote. After his dismissal, William Robeson endured several years of poverty. He resurfaced in Westfield, New Jersey, and became the minister of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. At the age of 62, he transferred to a larger church, St. Thomas AME Zion, in Somerville, New Jersey, where he ministered until he died at the age of 73 in 1918. For most of the century, from Woodrow Wilson's presidency of Princeton, beginning in 1902, until the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s, the prestigious university that dominated the town was its first fortress of segregation and racism. Einstein's research home, the Institute for Advanced Study, was independent and apart from the university. More than other Ivy League colleges, Princeton continued to attract a high percentage of students from southern states. The Princeton Herald explained that admitting black students to the university, while morally justified, would simply be too offensive to the large number of Princeton's southern students. After Bruce Wright was denied admittance to the university in 1936, when the school's officials discovered that he was black, Wright wandered through Princeton from one block to another. Describing an incident he felt represented white Princeton's racism, Wright says, "I noticed a white man sitting with his chair tilted back against the wall of a bar, listening intently to a radio playing within. Suddenly, the man leaped to his feet, virtually in front of me. He slammed one fist violently into the other hand and yelled, 'At last, they got that black son of a bitch.'" I later learned that Max Schmeling had knocked out Joe Louis in their first fight. Note: Wright, Black Robes, White Justice, 37. 2 years later, in 1938, the 2 boxers fought a second match in Yankee Stadium, with the whole world watching and Hitler openly rooting for the German heavyweight to demonstrate yet again the superiority of the master race. Louis knocked out Schmeling in the first round. Wealthy, white, and Southern, Princeton students created more than usual tension, grief, and terror for the town's African-American population. At one point early in the 20th century, the black community even set up a curfew to protect its children. Quote, "I remember what those students used to do for the bonfire, the victory bonfire, when a Princeton athletic team won a game." Emma Epps, one the principal and long-term leaders of Princeton's black community, told an interviewer in 1977. "They'd come down in our neighborhood and tear off our porch to burn up for their bonfire. They'd come down here and steal everything for that fire. Oh, they were terrible," she continued. "And we had a curfew. Just for that reason, you'd see us running. Mr. Kilfoy'd go, 'Run, Emmy, run,' and that curfew bell would ring at 9 p.m., especially in the spring. It was still kind of light at 9. They were terrors." A similar picture emerges from a 1950 interview with Paul Robeson, a contemporary childhood neighbor of Emma Epps, describing his recollections of what black people faced in Princeton. Almost every Negro in Princeton lived off the college and accepted the status that went with it. We lived for all intents and purposes on a southern plantation, and with no more dignity than that suggests. All the bowing and scraping to the drunken rich. His words, the drunken rich, strikingly echo the curfew terror story. The ringing of the bells at 9 p.m., probably from the church, meant not only that black children had to be at home, it meant a mob of drunken white racists was descending on the neighborhood. "Oh, how I remember those bells," said Emma Epps. Somewhat to his embarrassment, Einstein became in the United States, as he had been in most of Europe outside Nazi Germany, a living metaphor for genius, quote, "the smartest man on the planet," unquote. He was the science superstar and the most famous man in Princeton. Yet Einstein only had to walk a few blocks down Witherspoon Street to be reminded of how fleeting freedom could be. "The worst disease in American society," he wrote, "is the treatment of the Negro. Everyone who is not used from childhood to this injustice suffers from the observation. Everyone who freshly learns of this state of affairs at a maturer age feels not only the injustice, but the scorn of the principle of the fathers who founded the United States, that all men are created equal."
Context of White Supremacy. Much obliged again for folks hanging in while we had to get the audio uploaded. Again, I made a mistake with getting the audio mixed up, but we, for our perseverance, were rewarded with a number of racist jokes this specifically in the segment we just heard. I was going to say this week, but just in the second audio segment, I think we got quite a few. So our patience paid off, maybe. The number, 605-313-5164. The code 564-943#. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. So we finished up chapter 3. We'll pick up chapter 4 for next Thursday, 5 p.m. East or 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Folks who dialed in, if you have commentary on the first portion of the audio, I guess we have folks that we missed totally, like you didn't get to share at all during the first audio segment. Make sure you get your hand up. Don't wait until the last minute. We'll make sure everybody gets an opportunity to share. All of the folks who have a hand up, so that's Thomas in New York, our female caller in Florida, Henry in Chicago, retired firefighter, Thomas in New York, all the people that have a hand up, I think line should be open. If you have not shared at all, remember, go ahead and get your hand up. Don't wait till the last minute. Folks who have thoughts, please share.
Can I be heard?
Henry in Chicago? Yes, sir.
Yes. Lot better chapter than chapter 2. So got delved right into racism, even though it didn't talk much about Einstein, but, you know, it does constructively break down racism in Princeton or in the Witherspoon district, or whatever they call it, the Black Alley, whatever names that they have or tropes for it. Betsy Stockton, very, very interesting character here. Product of a rape. I wouldn't even call it a tragic arrangement. She's a product of a rape. Slave master raping the slave and producing her. So, and what they described of her before she was 13, wild and thoughtless, simmering with anger, wild little Negro girl who had to be educated, by this white family. So then she became an educator after that. But I thought that was a pretty interesting commentary on her childhood. James Taylor calling him Jigger, too much sounds like nigger. That's probably what they thought of him. Birth of a Nation, Power of Media, with that movie, the Klan basically kind of, rose to new heights, especially in that particular area, as the book says. The ringing of the bells at 9 p.m., probably from the church, not meant only that black children had to be in home. It meant a mob of drunken white racists was descending on the neighborhood. Sundown town with racist white people just drunk and doing all kind of things, probably looking for some black folks to hang. So that's all I have right now in my life.
Drunk white people. Let's see. Other folks who dialed in, if you have observations on the second audio segment, proceed. Nothing else stood out from the second segment, chapter 3. Read my notes then. Let's see. Thought chapter 3, then I'll check in maybe a little later. Let's see, for chapter 3, the other Princeton, we started off with a racist joke, I thought, to Harper's Monthly. So, I mean, they're still in existence, nearly 200 years. If in passing through New Jersey, a traveler came to a place where there were 2 darkies to every white man and 2 dogs to every Negro, he might be sure he was in Princeton. I think that's a racist joke. Now I'm trying to unpack. So they said that white people had a lot of slaves there. They had a lot of Southerners go to college there. So lots of whites, and they brought their darkies with them. And the darkies have dogs. Okay, a lot of dogs and niggers, presumably slaves, in Princeton. Okay, interesting. And this is in the young Paul Robeson. I mean, wow. All right, so that's how we start that one. And then he goes into more detail about the black experience here, so-called Jim Crow and all the rest. Man, turn 'em loose, Bruce. Black robes, white justice. We had talked about reading that on the book club. I have it on my shelf. Oh, it didn't work. I missed it the first time around. Unfortunate for Turn 'em Loose Bruce and what we heard before about Betsy Stockton, but double cowbell, I guess. But Turn 'em Loose Bruce, that was his nickname for Judge Bruce Wright. Controversial. That's not for this book, but he was controversial his time as a judge because he didn't just throw niggers in jail like 3 strikes and you're out of here. But 40 years, buddy, get out. That wasn't Turn 'em Loose Bruce. Again, that was his nickname. He was we're gonna let him loose. Let's try a little probation. How about that? We'll do a little probation. How about that? Let's turn them loose. Turn 'em loose, Bruce. That was what, and they got all this criminal justice reform, and he was derisively known as Turn 'em Loose Bruce. But yeah, you can check Black Robes, White Justice. I have his book on my shelf right here. Found out he got the scholarship. Found out he was Negro. Gotta get out of here. Let's see. I think some of that still happens today. Now, they said this was, 1936? I don't think we even in World War II at this point. A little early. And this is now, this 2020, this type of thing, where somebody, you get hired and, we read the resume and, don't think this is going to be, Continuing, let's see. So they don't have too many niggers here. Lots of racism throughout. And I appreciate that they go all the way back and talking about the university and the white people that are enrolled there. Their rich involvement with regards to having black slaves and purchasing, trading, all the rest, having the students bring their slaves on campus. And just, I felt like even with all that information, it was, kind of stodgy and not the most, entertaining or even purposeful reading. But I do see some value in showing the influence. Like they said that the university or Princeton, their structure influenced Harvard and Yale and a lot of these other Ivy League schools. These are the major white supremacist thought institutions in North America. It influenced their foundations of how they set up their, architecture and the rest of the school system. I think that's important as we get more information and, kind of moving through. And even, just thinking today. Let's see. The preaching I thought was significant. They talked about the best known, where they didn't have very many black students, if any, deliberately so at Princeton for years and years, forever almost. And they said the most known was John Chavis, and they talked about him being allowed to go out and do some speaking about racism. I think this is important because I talk about all the time. You don't have to do any shooting or killing anybody. They mentioned Nat Turner. You don't have to do any of that. Just speaking about racism sometimes can get you in trouble. You don't have to talk about racism per se, but just being a non-white person. Cynthia McKinney wasn't even talking about racism. She was just trying to find out accurate information about, what happened. Weapons of mass destruction. What are we talking about? We spending a lot of money here. Let's make sure we're getting accurate information. Get out of here. And then it turned out, oh man, she was right. Well, we don't want to hear from her. They mentioned John Chavis is preaching extensively in North Carolina and Virginia, the Coon Man. Chavis was quite active until 1832 when North Carolina, alarmed by the Nat Turner slave revolt the previous year, forbade Negroes to speak in public under any circumstances. Under any circumstances, you will be mute. In earlier years, when Chavis had a school in Raleigh, he is believed to have had both black and white students, unusual for an African-American teacher in North Carolina at the time. Somewhat so even today. Maybe not so in North Carolina, but you don't have a whole lot of black male teachers. They got whole reports and things about that 21st century. Let's see. Oh, I love this one. They talked, they were given a quote from one of the Princeton professors, and he's trying to explain some of the institutional racism and why they don't have the Negroes sitting with the white people in church, religion of white supremacy. And he says, prejudice of the lower classes of whites against blacks has become exorbitant and inhuman. See, they blame it on poor white people. That's another one of that racial focal pointing. It's not all white people. I'm not racist. The church is not racist. This is not the religion of white supremacy. We just got these, low class scoundrels, riffraff. They're just the worst, and they don't like the Negro, and it's inhuman, that's what I said. But what are we gonna do? We just can't have the Negroes. They don't say we could have moved the riffraff. We could have moved them up top and have the Negroes. Continuing, I thought this was when Henry in Chicago talked about we got a white author here, so we got a kind of co-author, so we kind of got to keep our antenna up. In the run-up to the Civil War, Princeton, like the rest of America, was divided, metaphor. Though many hated African Americans, he doesn't say white people, though many hated African Americans and the war, there were those who supported the abolitionist cause. That is total deception. We read Edward Baptist, The Half Has Never Been Told. He was quite explicit. The reason you didn't have a whole lot of successful runaway slaves is because it was a white army waiting to catch you. You had little to no white people who were opposed to slavery. Maybe they are not, who are opposed. You have little to no white people who oppose white supremacy racism. That's the accurate way to say it. They might be against slavery. That doesn't mean they support the Negro, and they made this explicitly clear. Even in some of the times where it was so-called Union soldiers, some of them rallying to go die. We're not doing this for the Negro. We got other same thing we got right now. We're not now protesting for the Negro. We're protesting for other reasons. We got other things going on. I thought that was really disingenuous, dishonest, to even make it seem like you had a substantial number of white people who were in support of black people, making it plain. You had a lot of racists who did not think slavery was the best way to operate the plantation. Not that I'm in support of the Negro at all. I'm just, Abraham Lincoln is even in that group. just, I don't like this whole slavery business. This is not the best way to do things. Next, Forced into Glory, LaRon Bennett, great book to read. I don't know if we could read it on the book club because it's kind of lengthy, but wow, it is amazing. Black author, LaRon Bennett Jr., Forced into Glory. Racist jokes, woo, it's got quite a few from Abraham Lincoln there. Let's see. Oh man, they did this because New Jersey did not form black, or as they called them, colored troop regiments. I think I had mentioned before, that white woman in New York, Miss Cooper, she called, that's her name. I don't do all that fake names up for these suspected racists, but when she called the police and she said, yeah, I'm going to call the police and tell them that an African American is threatening me. And I said, that right there, it doesn't make any difference. African American, Negro, coon, colored, whatever, it's all the same. Black, or as they called them, colored regiments. Yeah, you could have condensed chapter 2 and just tossed it. So the colored troops, got it. Totally understood. Like nigger troops, it's all the same thing. Let's see. Yes, I'm glad Henry in Chicago already touched on Betsy Stockton. That's another. Every time when they talk about these, it's not tragic. It's rape. It's rape. I don't know how old Betsy Stockton's mother was at the time, but a lot of these tragic arrangements, a lot of these rapes, it was child rape. A lot of times, Sally Hemings and Thomas Jefferson, it wasn't like Thomas Jefferson was 35 and Sally Hemings was 29 or even 21. A lot of times she's 10 and 12 and he's 37. That's what you get a whole lot of times. So it could have been a whole lot of child rape happening here, but this is, I mean, yeah, the entire way that this gets described is racism, white supremacy. I'll just go over it again. Ashbel Green, who raised Betsy Stockton, called her wild and thoughtless. Got all that. Until about the age of 13, her childhood seemed extremely difficult. Betsy Stockton may have been simmering with anger through Robert Stockton. Though Robert Stockton was her father, their relationship was shrouded in secrecies. Because Robert Stockton's wife was not Betsy's mother. Her mother, Celia, was Robert Stockton's slave. Celia, soon after her daughter's birth, ran away from her child and from slavery. Betsy Stockton, at the age of 6, possibly as part of a settlement of a civil case against Robert Stockton's estate, ended up as property of Ashbel Green. That's for Betsy. With Celia, they don't give information on what happened to her. Like, did she did she escape, like, successfully? Did she get caught and returned? Like, as I just said, Edward Baptist, he didn't have a whole lot of successful runaway slaves, so I'd be curious as to what happened to her. Anywho, yeah, all of that is rape and is not described accurately. They say Betsy became a member of the Green household, but they put that in quotes. I mean, yeah, let's see. Betsy goes on to start this school. Doesn't make much of a difference in how white people feel. I thought this was great. I'm not going to read the whole section now, but where they talk about, they have this published in the Princeton newspaper, the Princetonian. And this is, I guess, a racist kind of wandering through the black part of town. And that's right out of sundown towns where they have these little cute names for Niggerville and Coonsburg and, you know, Africa Town and all the rest of it, wherever they have stored the black people at. And then they think of all these little racist names to apply to that region. And then they go terrorize them. That was in Warmth of Other Suns, too. They talked about how the white people, I think it was in either Mississippi or Louisiana. I think it was Ida Mae Gladney. She talked about that. She said the exact same, almost verbatim. She said that the white people, that would be it. They would get drunk and come and shoot their guns all through town and terrorize the black part of town, part of white culture. And then they will tell us about Chicago. But yeah, this portion about, you know, look at all the rundown black houses and look at the chimney or what's left of it and all the shiftless Negroes. Right. They could go do this right now about opioid town with white people. Dog food. Let's see. Anything else? Yeah, I think Henry in Chicago had said. Peter Polite, I did make a note. This is one of the victims of racism, black people, who was around the campus, and he sold confections and ice cream and all the rest of it. He was known as Peter Polite. I did think, Peter Polite is probably not somebody who's going around and, you know, look at this coon. Your nutritional, certainly if you're selling ice cream and confections, you're not going to be calling people nutritional Uncle Toms. But I don't think you get the nickname Peter Polite and be allowed to do a whole lot of name calling. Could be in error. But either way, I just thought all of that, like you're on a campus that produces United States presidents, United States senators, and judges, leaders of the world. And you're Jigger, Nigger Paul, on the campus with a wheelbarrow of apples or peanuts. And I get to tell a funny story on their way to class, learning about how to rule me. Victims of racism, I'm not judging them. I'm just saying, like, wow, that is the system of white supremacy. And then they'll tell you, ignorant about racism. I don't know much about the Negro. Oh, is that Nigger Paul? Oh, my gosh. Oh, love it. Give me some of the wheelbarrow peanuts there. And an apple if you got it. Oh, I love Nigger Paul. He's the best. Let's see. They raised money to get him a tombstone. They loved Jigger. Loved old Jigger. I thought this was important. I'm trying to get the New York Times article. They said Alexander Dumas Watkins. They said he was the closest thing to an African-American teacher that Princeton ever had. The New York Times said that he was allowed to tutor some of the less intelligent students. Wow. We don't think too much of your kind, so we got some of our ignorant students over here. They failed a few times. Have fun with them. Yeah, you won't mess anything up. Woo! Let's see. Anything else I get in? Woodrow Wilson said exactly. Woodrow Wilson, they said he would buy his peanuts, get an apple or two from Nigger John, Jigger, and the rest of them, but he would not, under his leadership at Princeton, no place for African Americans, and he wasted no time making this perfectly clear. That's make it plain. See, they could do this throughout the text. Make it plain. Anything else I need to get in? Paul Robeson's dead. They get Joe Louis and Max Schmeling. I think we talked about them a few times before on the program. You get a whole lot of that with the black boxing bouts. I talked about that recently when it was Wilder and Fury 2. Like, you get a whole lot of that. There'll be a lot of hoopla. The black pugilist and the white pugilist are going to get it on, and sometimes they riot afterwards. And, you know, this is a big moment on racism. Not at all. It doesn't matter who wins. We're still in a system of white supremacy. I reckon that'll do it. Anybody else have anything they wanted to get in before we close out? Thanks for your patience again.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, sir.
Talking about me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes. Also, the host himself. That's where Gus T. Renegade got his name, I believe, because that name was identified with the quote-unquote star of the iconic movie Birth of a Nation. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But anyway, yes. Louis Schmeling, which was talked about, it's an example of white people on both sides. They benefited. The system of racial white supremacy benefited from both fights. Of course, with Schmeling knocking out Joe Louis, it gave some propaganda for Hitler and his regime in that part of the world, that of the physical superiority of white people. And then when Louis knocked out Schmeling, white people also benefited over here, because now I would imagine on the global system of racist white supremacy, if two vying white forces vying for what? Vying for the most most relevant or the best scientific means to mistreat people based on color, and you basically present into the face of that vying force a Negro, then that would be something to kind of like benefit that group. And that's what took place when Lewis defeated Schmeling. He was invited to the White House, and the president at that time, Franklin Roosevelt, was feeling his muscles and whatnot, and all this was broadcasted worldwide. And in turn, Joe Louis actually joined the forces over here very early in World War II, donated his purse, all of his purses, during that period of time to the effort, just to be thanked by getting into some severe income tax trouble, to whereas he was broke for the rest of his life. Literally, from the rest of his life, he was broke financially, with no restitution at all, other than Frank Sinatra paid for a funeral that was in a warehouse. Rampaging through black neighborhoods, white people. That is a centuries old activity of white people. After, for whatever reason, when they are happy about something and they go to hitting that liquor and whatever else they be smoking or injecting, they're going to rip and run. And I've used the term reveille before, and it was that identified with them as revelry. It could be something real severe, like people getting killed. It's fun to them, and the whole gambit behind it. You can find it all through history, as far as that's concerned. And those are the things that I picked up in the last reading. Thank you.
Much obliged. Thomas in New York.
Hey, yes, good commentary. And you had me laughing stuff with your commentary. The Black Princeton resident. I grew up in North New Jersey, which is a far cry from Princeton. Princeton would be like in the halfway point between Philadelphia and New York. So it's like, I guess if you don't mind commuting, it's a great place to live. You have access to those places. But I've never met a black person that lived in Princeton. I don't associate that area with black people. But in the book, the Black Princeton residents had a curfew, and when the white sports teams won or had a rally, they would come and loot the black area. The lady said they took her porch, break away the porch, but they didn't mention any raping. And drunken white men on an all-man campus with no white women around, excited and elated, already drunk, with the ability to riot and loot black people's stuff just to throw it in a fire. I just can't imagine them not doing any sexual activity, knowing the history of white people. So I'm just shocked that, that wasn't, not shocked, but just wish that was touched on. And I'll move my line. Thank you.
For sure. Any other folks' commentary that they want to get in?
Hello?
Can I be heard?
Heard both.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Thank you. I'll try to be very quick. Just with Jimmy Johnson, when it says that the Princeton residents interceded and purchased its freedom from the Southern bounty hunters, it's almost as if, I don't know if they're trying to make it seem as though those were the good ones that tried to be nice, but he really was just exchanged from Southern slavery to Northern slavery. I mean, all he was doing, he became a fixture, and he was entertaining customers and passers-by, and it seems like he didn't ever have enough money to have to have his own tombstone, have money set away for that. So they had to purchase a tombstone for him. Doesn't sound like he really lived a free life. So it just seems like an exchange from Southern slavery to Northern slavery. And then the other thing, I hope this isn't name calling, but whenever you said Jigger, it just made me think of American rap artist Jay-Z, and I hope it's not name calling because I think he made an effort to rename himself that in the public eye. So it was interesting every time that word was said, because I probably prior to reading this I wouldn't have thought of the negative connotations, but it does specifically say he was derisively nicknamed Jigger. So I'll mute my line on that.
Much.
Have you heard?
Yes, ma'am. Greetings, Mel.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I agree with Thomas in New York, and I know you, Gus, that you've raised this point on the show before, that white people will just riot over any sort of sports team. And just based on the sports story, I was just thinking sarcastically that, white supremacists would have a drunken brawl and set fire if somebody won a card game. And then I thought about it for a second, and I was like, I think that's what the Old West was. They're constantly playing cards, and then there's a massacre randomly, or a riot over like a card game. It would always start that way, and it's like a building to burn. And I'm just thinking, armed is armed. It really doesn't matter what sports name it is, or violence is violence. It doesn't matter what the event is. My second thought was that the Stockings to me are a very strange family, and now I want to do more research on them. Some of the background information I found out about General Stockton, one of the sons of Richard, who went to California and he became a naval officer, was that he apparently disrupted and attacked slave ships. This was part of his effort in the recolonization of sending the ex-slaves back to Africa, or maybe freeing slaves and sending them back to Africa. So I thought that was weird. And then they had that actual abolitionist grandson of the signer of the Declaration of Independence, who was the friend of Lincoln. And then of course Betsy Stockton, child of the slave rapist, Stockton's father, and she was allowed to be extremely successful. And I thought that it was very good that Betsy Stockton, when she went to Hawaii, it said that she learned the native language, and it's such a common practice in colonization efforts to basically kind of co-opt a local native person and get them to learn English and then translate for you, as opposed to you go and learn the language and actually interact with people in their own cultural space, their own language space. Because languages, there's no translation for certain things. The part about Woodrow Wilson talking about if only the movie The Birth of a Nation wasn't so true, it's just so trifling, especially considering that he runs the college in a town where Betsy Stockton exists in the first place. She's the result of a white rapist. But he focused on this imaginary black racist somewhere out there. I thought that the black male sports more, owning a thrift store or a secondhand store for all of the new items that the Brady Rich Princeton students would throw away was just great. If you're getting hand-me-downs, you might as well make a profit. It's just, I think he's the original Craigslist and eBay. And I'd be curious to know if he sold those items to white or black customers, or maybe both. I don't know how it was with white people entering the black side of town and doing commerce. And then I was thinking that, so they have their own, the black people of Witherspoon Street and the two other surrounding black streets, they have their own little town and they have their own autonomy. They're literally practicing the separateness that the church members want during the most segregated place in America on Sunday morning. And they're still getting their porches torn apart. And I'm just thinking that's what tornadoes do. It takes a lot of effort to tear a porch apart. I don't think I know where to start with that. I don't know what the porches are made of, but wood, I don't know how to, that's just really complicated for me. Also, there were 2 students, I think, who were rejected from Princeton on the basis of them being black, 2 black males. And I was thinking that I'm surprised that they didn't ask about race on the college application. But I'm thinking that maybe they didn't think that many black people would apply because they're not quote unquote coping well with their freedom. I think like that one group said. And then my final thought was that I really hope Celia got away, the slave mother of that C.O.W.S, kind of like the black female that George Washington, nighttime war hero, allegedly emerging from the smoke of gunfire. He was chasing that black woman and the black slave, ex-slave, and he fell off that horse when he was chasing her. And I kind of hope that Celia got away too. And that was it.
Woo! Man. Much obliged from our narrator, Mel. The Stockton family would be, I mean, you got duels and all kinds of things. Like, send them back to Africa. Like, yeah. Rapes, all kinds of things. All kinds of things. Might be in biographies. I said we've done a lot of biographies. There probably is a pretty good Stockton biography out there. I thought that was important too, time and energy, because like just that whole little passage where, the Princeton football team would win or lose or whatever. And he said they would come and tear the porch off for the bonfire and terrorism. Where she said, I don't even know how to do that. Like, that just seems like time and energy. Like, yes, time and energy to go and take everything off of, or I guess the whole neighborhood. I mean, I guess this is not just one person where you just go take all their benches and chairs and whatever else that is not nailed down. But to take all of that, that's time and energy. Even reminded me of right now when we got a 9 o'clock curfew. Like, man, we are supposed to be reading this book right now. We've had curfew for rowdy white people and their unruly street activity. That was one reason for the curfew, the Rona. Woo, man, oh man. Anybody else? Anything else? Rabbi? That was so worth it. Like, we had all that delay. Like, wow, we got 2 racist jokes and all that. Like, woo, super worth it. Like, if we had to do all that for chapter 2, I'd have been upset. But wow, good read. Anybody else? Okay, I think we got everybody. Yes, okay. So we'll be back next week, chapter 4. You can check out the video in between now and then, C-SPAN video. It's online. Like I said, it's about an hour, but it's very constructive. You can break it up, watch a little at a time. You can turn Netflix off, right, and watch that. Very constructive. We'll be back and ready for chapter 4 next Thursday. We'll be here tomorrow, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, for neutralizing workplace racism. Hopefully, nobody has had to deal with too much drama this past week, but we will try our best to use logic and help people solve problems if that is the case. Much obliged to everyone participating this evening. Hope it was worthy of your Thursday evening. Sobriety would be best. Man, drunk white people, they are the worst. I've said that for years, the worst combination in the known universe. Whites, alcohol. Terror, that's what they said. Terror, that's what it is. Stay sober. Let's keep our brain computer working correctly. Probably don't even want to be around too many non-white people if they're intoxicated and not thinking correctly, because that can end up in terrorism a lot of times too. So let's stay sober. In addition to being sober, let's be buckled every time we are in a vehicle, driver or passenger. Let's do everything that we can to be safe and to minimize contact with race soldiers, terrorists, badge or no. Again, still stick with. I think we should probably be staying in. Mel was talking about they were doing some of that terrorism and riding and all that craziness down in California, and they've been doing a lot of that here, and you've got a lot of armed white people, as I said, sometimes with a badge, often without a badge. It's a dangerous time for many reasons. I would big time suggest staying in the house, so that way you don't have to deal with the whole driving thing and being stopped, and lots of things could happen. If you are going to go out, be strategic, really be alert. You know, you don't want to have music playing really loud or earbuds or what have you. I probably wouldn't be on the phone. I would just be paying attention to what's happening so I can be really alert to my surroundings. Anything looks suspicious, untoward, this is a wrap. It's not really a good time to take chances. You don't want to be too risky about things, your health or anything else. Be serious. And again, any confrontations with a white person, they come up to you or whatever, however it starts or what have you, you should be thinking this fella could be armed. This woman could be armed. Probably is armed. Let me try to get out of here as quickly as I can. I could die quickly. They might have backup. If they're white, they will have backup. I don't. Really be having that in the forefront of your mind. It is a dangerous time this year, man. Anywho, if you are going out, you are sober, you are buckled and alert. If you're driving, you are not on the phone. That way, just trying to minimize contact with race soldiers, badge or no. All of that said, Creator, we ask that you help us remain patient with other black people, victims of white supremacy. We ask that you help us remain patient with ourselves. Remind us to demonstrate the highest levels of black self-respect at all times, in all places, each and every time we are in contact with another black person. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. C.O.W.S signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.